Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching second and final part of what if Naruto was sent to EarthLand after his fourth Shinobi war. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
And finally, welcome to the slaves' barrack. Rob finished grandly. Spreading his arms out grandiosely, the younger children clapped at the end of Rob's presentation, and the older children smiled lightly at the old man's infectious good mood. Even the other slaves slouched over on the floor exchanged amused glances, having had their fair share of Rob's optimistic disposition. The slave quarters themselves, however, were a dreary place in contrast to the generally pleasant atmosphere. There was a soft pitter-patter as drops of water on the ceiling drummed a beat on the cold cobblestone floor, its area of impact outlined by a growing stain of mold. The only source of light in the large, chilly space was a single barred window that let in a chilling draft. The gray stone floor was flecked with cracks, and the shadows strewn by the small beam of light from the window didn't make it any happier. Still though, the slaves managed to keep an optimistic view of things, which was evident from their amused faces. Given that Urza was the children's leader and all, Rob had grown fond of her and gently led her into the slaves' quarters. Of course, there was Naruto and Simon, but those two had a certain hardness to them that the red-haired girl seemed to lack. Rob smiled warmly at the terrified teenagers and said, "So welcome, and don't feel too down, we take care of our own the best we can." Naruto moved forward to shake the elderly man's hand after Urza returned the grateful smile. "I appreciate it, old man. These kids need as much happiness as they can," he said, eyeing the crowd as Simon began leading the kids into the quarters and attempted to introduce each one. "Well," the blonde thought to himself, "at least until I can come up with a good escape plan." Simon started a little game of introductions, and Naruto was about to go over and join it when he heard a hand tap his shoulder. When he turned around, he saw a small group of people watching him with interest. A boy with blue hair, who appeared to be 12 years old but was actually 18, stood at the head of the group, holding out his hand. The boy pronounced, "Name's Jelal Fernandez." He had a tattoo of some kind around his right eye, which, if it hadn't been so painful to get, would have looked cool. Naruto shook his hand and grinned like Simon. The boy had steel in him, but his life as a slave had hardened it. Recalling what appeared to be the tradition of placing the given name before the last name, he responded, "Naruto Uzumaki." Unusual country. Jelal smiled a little and then reached out to Urza, who had been looking at him with owlish eyes. He smiled warmly and said, "Hey there, kid, name's Jelal, nice to meet you." Urza's face turned red and she sputtered angrily, but it was unclear whether this was due to embarrassment or anger. She sniffed arrogantly and slapped the outstretched hand away from herself rather heatedly. She laughed and said, "I'm not a kid." Jelal and Naruto stifled their laughter as they looked at the girl's offense with amusement. She said, lowering her arrogant gaze and turning away while biting her lip. She rubbed her arms nervously and said, "I don't know how old I am." Naruto's smile vanished, and he and Jelal dropped to their knees next to her. Anxiously, Jelal bit his tongue. In this case, what could he say? He was undoubtedly a slave, but prior to the slave raid that claimed his parents' lives, he had led a typical life and shared all of his birthdays with them. His 12th birthday was the only one without a formal celebration, marked only by a quiet rendition of "Happy Birthday" to himself while counting the stars in the middle of the night. Yes, it was awful, but at least it was better than no birthday at all. Fortunately for him, Naruto was the first to speak. He said calmingly, "Hey, it's all right." He went on, ignoring the fact that he was only 12 years old. "It's not a big deal. I never celebrated my birthday either. Did you know that? Every year, until I became 13, no one celebrated my birthday, and no one baked me a cake. I hated my birthday, since that was the only day where I really felt alone." Urza reluctantly raised her eyes and gave him a tearful look. "Really? That's so sad," she muttered as she buried her head in his jacket, leaving a damp stain behind. Naruto gave Jelal a thumbs up and winked. The brunette returned the thumbs up with gratitude and a little sigh of relief that he didn't have to speak. Naruto chuckled and gave the young redhead a gentle shake. "Hey now, what did I say about crying? Geez, I'm going to get a new jacket with all the tear stains on this thing." He chuckled. It was a start, but Urza's teary giggle sounded more like a hiccup. Naruto grinned and gave her a gentle shove. "Tell you what, I'll give you a birthday. Why not? Come to me later, Urza. But first, say hi to all the other kids here." Before guiding the redhead to a crowd of people her own age, Jelal leapt on it and swiftly took her hand. Naruto moaned loudly and slumped on the ground as he was leaving, but his crooked smile remained on his face. "Man, I'm getting soft. The only time I remember talking to a kid that age was Konohamaru, and I did that by kicking his ass." He laughed. A troubled frown replaced the smile as Naruto's mind started to stray to his rival, friend, or student. "How is he doing, I wonder?" Idly, the blonde thought. "Now that I'm gone, I wonder if he'll become Hokage." Naruto's face turned pale as his thoughts drifted from Konohamaru to his other friends, his deceased friends. His friends Shino, Choji, Ino, Shikamaru, and Hinata in order. When no one else showed genuine concern for him, Hinata, a kind girl, did her confession had always left him speechless. Perhaps there could have been more than just platonic companionship between them in more tranquil times, but that is no longer the case. No, not anymore. Choji and Shikamaru, he had two of his closest friends. The two in Kiba had always been there for him. Even when he was a fool at the academy together, they had fought, played, and received punishment from Iruka-sensei. His kiss with Sasuke was undoubtedly too intense, but you didn't get much closer than that, and that added to the heartbreak of their deaths. Shino Naruto had always had a strange friendship with the stoic and rational heir of the Aburame clan that was Shino, always in the background, logically defending him despite the fact that they had never met in the academy. They had fought in a war together, and when one of them spills blood for you, an unbreakable bond is formed, a connection that Madara broke, not cut to pieces. Ino pig Ino, she was constantly the loud one, arguing over every trivial matter and competing with Sakura for everything. Despite their frequent arguments, the two were the best of friends, and you got to know your pink-haired teammate, despite her loudness, when your best friends were on her team. And now, without her incessant buzzing presence, there was a silence that would not go away. Something damp dropped onto Naruto's trousers, leaving a darkening mark where the liquid had landed. The blonde cautiously touched his face, flinching at the moisture, weeping. To get rid of them, the Uzumaki rubbed his eyes and cheeks. He refrained from crying after Ero Sennin's passing. He made a self-promise to never cry again. Ero Sennin, for him, so many had lost their lives. As Naruto's dark thoughts deepened, he became engrossed in the world and ignored the slaves' little giggles as they joked and took comfort in being like themselves. When the Uzumaki turned around after a hand tapped his shoulder, he saw three children staring at him with a great deal of concern and curiosity. One girl and two boys were present with his raven hair. One boy resembled Simon, but he had a bigger nose and a wider chin. The other boy, who was hiding behind the black-haired one, was a young child, perhaps 7 or 8 like him. This boy had light blonde hair and slightly tanned skin, but his hair did not spike up like his did. The last individual was a young girl who appeared to be the pack's unofficial leader. She had the same bowl-cut hairstyle as Urza, but it stopped short of her ears. She also had rather feline-like features, which gave her a strange yet endearing appearance. Her wide eyes crinkled with concern as she asked, "Are you all right?" Naruto was still shocked by the group coming toward him and was unsure of how to react. And that prompted a more significant query: was he truly okay? Since Jiraiya, he had never been this emotional, and even then, he didn't have time to think about it. Naruto abruptly got to his feet, causing the young girl to recoil, and gave him a slap on the cheeks. Damn it. He was Uzumaki Naruto. Unlike Sasuke, who spent the majority of his life brooding here, he wasn't going to do that. He would live bravely for his friends, who had all given their lives for him. Furthermore, now that he was at the tower, he still had to set the slaves free. He pushed all of his negative thoughts to the back of his mind and said, "I'm fine, thanks for that." With a smile, the girl gestured to herself brightly. She said, "Okay then. The funny-looking guy with the big shnoz is Wally," she said, pointing over the boy with the large nose and raven hair who was hiding behind him. "My name's Miliana, by the way." It should be mentioned that Sho, the crybaby over there, started sniffling at his rather disparaging title, "and that's all of us." Naruto chuckled lightly, having managed to conceal all of his feelings behind the mask he had created for himself during his time as an academy student. He approached Wally, shook his hand, and tousled Sho's hair before saying, "And I'm Naruto Uzumaki, nice to meet you. Hey kid, no crying, no weakness. You may be a kid, but in this shithole tower, you've got to be a man. How else are you going to protect Miliana?" Sho immediately started crying and fled. Wally gave Naruto, who was completely perplexed and embarrassed, a thumbs up for effort and chased after the young child. Ironically, no one gave the boy any attention. Well, it must have happened often. "Hey, Neko-san?" Naruto pivoted and gestured to himself. "Me? Neko?" With a serious nod, Miliana raised 3 fingers to her cheeks in the shape of whiskers. "You're like a big kitty." The Uzumaki couldn't decide whether to laugh or feel offended. The latter was his choice. Naruto got giddy with laughter. He had been referred to as Demon Boy and Child of the Prophecy, but this was the first time he had been called a cat. His laughter overcame him, and he clutched his stomach. Oh, if Kurama were awake, he'd have a fit. That Fox's ego would definitely be deflated. Naruto managed to suppress his guffaws into unpredictable snorts as he gasped, "I guess I am the whiskers are a birthmark though." With a big smile, Miliana quickly grabbed Naruto's face and nuzzled his whiskers. She cried, "I love kitties. Kitty 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 kitty," she sang. With a sheepish smile, Naruto patted the young girl, who was still muttering the strange mantra. Kitty. To herself out of the corner of his eye. He noticed that most of the slaves were giggling at him. I'm sorry, it didn't last. A pair of guards entered their quarters as the door slammed open. Everyone in the room instantly stood at attention. Their faces covered in blank masks. Little Rosemary Village residents who were unfamiliar with the customs were the ones who did not. Growling, the man said, "Work now, remember, if any one of you doesn't fill the quota, that man will be flogged once for every inch in height not built, and twice for every brick left over." The man looked at Rob. "You there?" With steady, unwavering eyes, the elderly man staggered forward. He reminded himself that he was a fairy tale mage. This was insignificant. "Yes, sir?" The gloved hand made contact with exposed flesh as the slave swung at Rob. Rob cried out as he fell after a meaty smack. Everyone flinched and looked away. If it had been anyone else, they would have offered assistance regardless of the repercussions, but Rob had made it clear that no one was to assist him. Following Jalal's whipping for assisting the elderly man in front of the slaver, no one wanted to oppose Rob because it was one of the few times they had witnessed him acting truly irate. Regretfully, Naruto had not been informed of that. The Uzumaki hurried to assist the elderly man in standing up. "What the hell?" he screamed, shouting at the man in the uniform. The man kept talking to Rob while pointedly ignoring Naruto. When he stopped, the slave and his companion turned around and started to walk away. "I thought I told you to tell the new children of the customs here this was a light punishment. I'm in a good mood today. Next time, it'll be harsher, and the kids will join you. Be ready in a minute to go outside and begin building." The two strode off after saying, "Oh, and boy, help the grandpa again. I guarantee that you won't have a hand to support him with." After pushing Naruto away, Rob got to his feet shakily and gave the blonde a glare. "What do you think you were doing?" Naruto retorted, "Helping you. What else would I be doing?" Rob asked, his benign eyes flickering with annoyance. "You think I'm weak, do you? And tottering old man that needs help everywhere he goes, eh?" Rob turned around and started to tell the slaves in line to leave when Naruto's voice rang out. "Never help me again, boy. I'd rather I face the consequences than a little kid like you." "That's bullshit," shouted Naruto. "You said, when we got here, that we take care of our own. How the hell is that going to happen if we ignore you when you get hurt? That kind of one-sided help is no help at all. Don't give me that shit, old man. You have the right to live just as much as anybody else, and I'll be damned if I don't help you." The only sound in the room was Naruto's labored breathing. After a moment of staring at the blonde, Rob sighed. Rob gently pushed the group out and said, "Let's go out with you lot." Simon and Jelal were the only ones left. With a heavy sigh, the elderly man knelt before Naruto. He said, "You're older than you look." Naruto was taken aback when the former mage stated it as an assertion rather than a query. "Those eyes of yours don't come at so early an age. You've gone through a lot pain, but still, here, you just don't understand. Leave me be, child. I have my reasons, and they are mine alone." Evidently annoyed by the old man's obstinacy, Naruto gave him a fierce look before grunting and rushing out the door. Later, he would have time to persuade Rob. The blonde was the object of the former fairy tale mage's sullen gaze. Rob couldn't really blame the boy either, and it was clear what he was going through. When he had insisted on buying time for his friend to escape the Slavers, Makarov had said precisely the same thing to him. The way things ended was unfortunate. If they hadn't been exhausted from an S-class mission, they wouldn't have even been caught. Furthermore, the Slavers identified him as a mage and continued to beat him until all of his Eternano reserves were being used to try to heal him. Rob followed the blonde out the door with another sigh, something he's been doing a lot more lately. After exchanging anxious looks, Simon and Jelal hurried out last, swiftly positioning themselves on either side of Naruto. The blonde gave the two of them a quick glance before responding briefly. "Midnight, tonight we need to talk about getting out of this hellhole." In the meantime, Rosemary Village is surrounded by forests. Using his sword of Kusanagi as a makeshift walking stick, Sasuke rubbed his eyes and plodded on. Sasuke didn't care that it was a terrible shame for such a magnificent weapon. With a yawn, the Uchiha looked to his right, where Kagura's snoring form had been thrown over his shoulder. He rubbed his eyes once more and complained, what on earth happened to these woods? The foolish girl had fallen asleep halfway through the night, and he had to carry her the rest of the way because he had hardly slept at all. Better days had passed for him. The sun shone down on him, and the birds overhead chirped joyfully. It only infuriated Sasuke, but now that he could see the sun clearly, he was approaching the forest's edge, where the canopy was much less dense. After placing Kagura gently on a log, the Uchiha used the sheath of the sword of Kusanagi to savagely stab her side. With a yelp, the girl with raven hair sat up and gave Sasuke a fierce look in return. However, as Sasuke started removing his shirt, her scowl quickly turned into a flush. She stumbled, "WW, what are you doing?" and quickly covered her eyes with her hands to avoid looking at Sasuke's body. She did, however, leave large spaces between her fingers for a pleasant view. Unfortunately for her, Sasuke's gray jacket smacked into her face, causing her to yell, interrupting her brief performance. Not caring that his torso was exposed for the world to see, Sasuke snapped back, "Shut up and put on the shirt. I'm a guy but you're a girl, and a child at that. You lost your shirt defending yourself from the wolves, so I'm lending you mine. I'll get another at the nearest town. Besides," he giggled, "why are you getting so excited? You're just a kid, you shouldn't even like this stuff." Kagura sputtered, "Shut up," hiding the ragged remnants of her own clothing and hastily putting on the jacket. Even Uchiha, who is usually stoic, couldn't help but snicker with laughter at the sight. Given that Sasuke was at least 4 or 5 years her senior and that the jacket was designed to fit loosely even on him, it was clear that the jacket was too big for her. Despite being a short-sleeved jacket, the sleeves reached all the way down her arms, and the hem hung down to her knees. The entire lower portion of the Uchiha's face was hidden by the rather high collar that she coveted, which rose up to touch her nose. "Shut up!" Kagura yelled again, her red flush starting to spread to her ears. Sasuke smiled thinly and recomposed his features into their neutral mask. He reprimanded, "Calm down, Kagura. Language." After glancing at the girl, he started to leave the forest. "Now fold down that collar and follow me. We've wasted enough time as is. Do try to keep up, we're almost there." Before chasing after the Uchiha, Kagura gritted her teeth and flushed in embarrassment. Lupinous Town. A few hours later. Whining, Kagura swung her little bag of rice that Sasuke had purchased around. "I'm tired." Maybe the word bought isn't appropriate. It wasn't exactly buying to use the Sharingan to force the store owner to give him money, then use that money to buy the rice. Bartering? Out of the corner of his eye, Sasuke gave her a quick glance. With a sigh, he moved his weight from his right to his left hand. At the moment, a 5-meter-long stack of supplies was perched precariously on one hand. As a barely teenage boy carrying a weight at least 3 times his own weight in one hand, he attracted attention from people all over the street. Luckily, he had succeeded in stealing a shirt from a businessman, so he was viewed with admiration rather than disgust. Without disturbing the pile, the Uchiha swiped his hand to remove a packaged cutlet of meat, which struck Kagura and abruptly stopped her complaining. The boy with the onyx eyes quickly shot back, "Quiet, child." He paused, as though considering whether to look at Kagura's visibly angry face, then shrugged and carried on, "Hurry up, it's well past midday, and I have to find a nice clearing in the woods to sleep in." Kagura pouted and puffed her cheeks, saying, Why the woods? I want to sleep in a hotel. Just do that freaky thing you did with the rice-selling Oji-chan." Why was she even following him, stupid Oni-chan? Sasuke frowned as his supply pile teetered on the edge of collapse. To at least try to make a ceiling scroll, he would need to purchase some paper and ink later. "I am a shinobi, Kagura. There is no luxuries in that life, only blood, death, and betrayal. I will not sleep in a public place, where there are plenty of places to attack." Orochimaru had made him learn the fundamentals of the art even though it wasn't exactly his forte. Kagura sulked once more. Attack? She thought Sasuke was just being paranoid. However, a portion of his brief monologue remained with her. "Life of a shinobi? Are you going to teach me about that?" Sasuke stopped suddenly and gave her a fierce look while blaring his Sharingan. The young child screamed a little and staggered back in terror. The Uchiha hissed, "Never ask me that again. The life of a shinobi is dead, and exists in the other world. There is no need for hired killers in this place, nor will there ever be. I and Naruto are the only shinobi in this land, and are an abnormality. Because of it my art will die with me." It was unusual for the Uchiha to lose his temper like that, so he let out a deep sigh and slapped his own cheek. He addressed a shaky Kagura, saying, "Besides," he recalled the various irate rumors of the villagers about a mage who had destroyed their castle while carrying out some kind of mission, and remarked, "You deserve more than a life of blood. I'd much rather you be a mage. It'll be the closest you'll ever be to a shinobi, and it seems much more docile if it has a mission system of sort." "But I don't have any magic." "Whoosh!" she exclaimed, flamboyantly waving her arms. She looked at Sasuke. "When nothing happened? See? Nothing." The Uchiha moaned at the child's mischievous behavior and palmed his face. He looked at a store and said, Just shut up. Follow me, I have something for you." Kagura suddenly stopped talking and followed Sasuke into the store, where she let out a startled gasp. This is a sword shop." the girl with the black hair exclaimed as she darted into the rather large store and started to gaze brilliantly at the weapons. The shopkeeper chuckled and said, "It sells more than swords, little missy. But yes, swords are the most popular here." Nearing the end of his prime, the store owner was a kind man. His hair was as salty and peppery as his beard, and he wore glasses with horn rims over his eyes. His stocky frame and firm arms gave him the appearance of a swordsman, but years of inexperience had caused his belly to sag. He was far from his best, but not quite incompetent yet. Sasuke scowled as he looked over the swords compared to his sword of Kusanagi. All of these were merely shabby pieces of metal from a stack of practice swords. He selected a small wooden bakken and tossed it up and down in an experiment. He said it was well balanced. I'll take this one. A practice sword, lad? You seem quite competent in the way of the sword, though the sword at your waist is a beauty, no embellishments, but very well made. The storekeeper's eyes gleamed as he discovered something intriguing. Sasuke whispered, the sword of Kusanagi was a gift by a dying teacher. Surely it wasn't a lie. He was taught by Orochimaru, who also gave him the sword. What if he omitted the fact that Sasuke killed Orochimaru? Why would that matter? PSH, trivial details. The bakken is not for me, it's for the girl. Examining the swords lining the store, Kagura gasped with excitement as she snapped out of her small world. She squealed like a child, which she was, by the way she rushed to embrace the stoic boy, Sasuke, who gently removed her from him. Really? A sword? For me? Grabbing the girl by the head, Sasuke rubbed the bridge of his nose. He gazed into her sparkling eyes before hurling her out the door and into the stack of supplies he had scattered in front of the store. Stop getting so excited. This is just a way for me to get you strong enough to defend yourself. The sooner I can leave without a pest like you following me, the better, he said. Now wait outside. To get even with Sasuke, Kagura crossed her arms, took a loud sniff, then selected a box of tomatoes from the stack and took a large bite out of the ripest one. With a pointed disregard for her, Uchiha turned to face the shopkeeper. His onyx eyes turned a deep crimson as he gazed at the man. Their iris rimmed with 3 tomos. The tomos continued to spin until they were barely perceptible. Now then, shall we discuss the payment of the sword? With glazed eyes, the man simply gave a faint nod. Sasuke grinned and gave the rusty old shuriken, the only item he was willing to give up in any case. He was a kunai guy, and he thought the price was pretty reasonable. Sasuke spins the rusted projectile on his finger and smirks. A high-quality shuriken, complete with 4 points and a hole in the middle. What do you say? He asked. Sasuke took the storekeeper's dumb nod as confirmation of the Uchiha. Sasuke hastily left before the genjutsu wore off, saying, well, in that case, I'll be off. Have a great day. He felt guilty right away, though he couldn't explain why. When he noticed Kagura looking rather dejected at the side of the road with the partially consumed remnants of a tomato by her side, he put his hand on her shoulder and gave her a shake. Her moods fluctuated wildly. Hey number, being depressed, a strong person doesn't cry so easily. Kagura gave him a fierce look and protruded her tongue. What do you care, stupid? You said you would just leave. Kagura. Grabbing her arm, Sasuke lifted her. He met her gaze with a stoic expression of profoundly concealed concern, but without any malice. Before hurling a bag of rice in her direction, he stated, and I can't baby you forever, and one day you'll have to walk on your own 2 feet. With a oof, she caught it. Sasuke was already traveling down the road with his load balanced on his hand. When she looked up, he halted, pivoted, and gestured with his hand. But until that day comes, I'll watch over you and teach you what I know, so hurry up. Even a freeloader like you should pull her own weight. Kagura smiled, leaned into her Oni-chan, and skipped beside the Uchiha while giggling softly. He said she was a freeloader, but she pointedly ignored him after looking down at her and debating whether to pull her away from him. Sasuke shrugged and ignored the situation. It's getting dark. We'll start your sword training tomorrow, he replied. Still practically prancing, Kagura agreed amiably. Hi. When they arrived at the edge of the forest, Sasuke spread out a sleeping bag he had purchased, stolen, and placed Kagura, who had already fallen asleep, on the soft down. The Uchiha hastily erected a makeshift tent for the young girl. As thunder rumbled overhead, he gazed at the child's face. She appeared so naive in her sleep, so painless and worry-free. Did Itachi used to look at him like this before? Back when things were easier, more joyful. In between packing supplies into a hollow tree and building a shelter for Kagura, Sasuke had not had time to set up a shelter for himself when the first drops of precipitation started to fall. Gradually dampening his body, he gazed up at the black sky, ignoring the cold that was creeping into him. He pondered, what are you doing now, Naruto? He looked at Kagura's sleeping form and then gave her a gentle smirk. Have you adjusted to this world? He asked. I'm certainly beginning to. With a loud sneeze, Naruto shoved his fist up his nostrils, somehow controlling the outburst. Shut up. Jelal and Simon both growled. You'll get us caught. You're the one who called us here tonight. One of the many laws that ended in a day in the detention chamber was the well-known prohibition against socializing after curfew. This is what would happen if the 3 of them were apprehended. Rob growled. Really? You shouldn't be doing this. If any of you are caught being involved in a plot to free the slaves, you'll be executed on the spot. Please, just lay low until the opportunity rises, it's safer. Naruto's whiskered face settled into a blank mask as he shook his head quietly. He said, "No, Rob, opportunities only appear when they are created. Stop feeling so damn responsible and let us try to help you, help all of us, for once." Rob appeared to be about to argue, but he eventually hung his head in surrender. It hurt how much the boy reminded him of young Makarov. He agreed, saying, "All right. But promise me that it'll work. Promise me that you'll get everyone here free safely." Without averting his gaze from the young girl, Naruto gave Urza's sleeping form a gentle look before responding to the elderly man. He pledged, "I promise. If anything, I promise that the kids from Rosemary will escape. I could have easily freed them in the beginning, but I had to let them be so I could help everyone else here. I promise." With a quiet grunt, Rob rolled over and curled into a ball to make himself more comfortable. "All right, boy, don't let me down now, but I'll trust you here." Simon and Jelal leaned in curiously, and even Rob unfurled from his little ball and stopped pretending to sleep as Naruto smiled and turned back to the two boys, whose faces were obscured by the drab moonlight, and drew on the cobblestone floor using a piece of charcoal he had swiped while working in the yard. "All right, so this is the tower's basic design," pointing to a location in the center of the tower. Naruto stated, "This is where we are. I can create clones, and I have a few that have disguised themselves as slavers to check out the layout of the place." "Whoa, wait, and you're a mage?" Jelal hissed. Naruto retorted, "Nope, my name is Uzumaki Naruto." At the unconventional answer, Jelal leaned back and palmed his face. Naruto grinned and pointed to the base of the tower, saying, "This is where the slavers sleep and the guards' quarters are. They keep those strange guard dogs a few rooms across. The boats carrying recently captured slaves arrive out on the port. A massive ship is reportedly scheduled to arrive in port tomorrow. Its goal was to switch the slavers at the tower and those working inland. It will be challenging because we will be facing twice as many slavers as usual, but we will defeat and seize this ship." Naruto took a deep breath and resumed his brief speech. "It has plenty of room for all the slaves. Jelal, you're the unofficial leader of the slaves here, so they'll listen to you better than both me or Simon. And Simon is basically the caretaker of the new horde of slaves from that burned village Soa." "Rosemary Village? What? The village of Rosemary? That's the village's name." Simon cut him off, scowling at Naruto's obvious disrespect for his beloved house. With a dismissive wave of his hand, Naruto said, "That's not the point. Hey, stop staring at me that way. Rosemary is no longer with us, but the village isn't because the children are still present. Do you not understand?" With a sigh, Simon nodded his head, and the shadows on his face seemed to grow longer, making him look gaunt. "All right, let's go because they will trust you. You will be in charge of the Rosemary children, while Jelal will be in charge of everyone else. Are you both on the same page?" As the boys nodded, Naruto yawned and used the piece of charcoal to scratch his head, leaving his golden hair streaked with black. "All right, so I'll make a big commotion tomorrow, get caught, and go to the detention center. In addition to buying plenty of time, I'll leave a clone to finish the job and steal the slavers' keys. Get out of there and use the keys when they dispel. My clones will relay information to me, so simply punch one and a." Jelal replied, "No, yes, precisely. I'm glad you under what? Why do you say, no, that's the strategy. No, it will be me who ejects the guards. They'll spend more time with me than with you because they know me better, and I can agitate them more effectively than you can," Jelal thought. "That's not the point here, Jelal," said Naruto, shaking his head. "I've been trained to resist torture because I'm a shinobi." "Yes, but the children should also be shielded from the guards on the ship we plan to steal using the same strength. I'll be all right." The arrogant blonde finally bowed his head and nodded, saying, "Okay, but I'll send a clone your way to look after you, just in case." Naruto scowled and scratched his head with the piece of charcoal once more, which made sense, but he didn't want to let Jelal go alone. Call it paranoia, but he felt uneasy. He grinned, recalling the time he used the Hiraishin in Rosemary. Speaking of which, he needed to locate a smith who could produce more of those, as he only had two and had used one in an attempt to save the girls. "Just yell, and I'll be there in a flash." Literally. "You got it," Jelal said, grinning and putting his hands together. "I promise not to disappoint you." "I know you won't," Naruto said, grinning back and pumping his hand. "You're a decent youngster. Tomorrow, I'm depending on you. Yes, are we aware of the plan? Simon and I get the people out of here, and Jelal is the distraction. Easy. The doo-doo hits the fan when I give the signal. Nothing can go wrong." With a broad smile that threatened to split his face, Naruto placed his hand in the circle and said, "All right, this is fantastic." Simon and Jelal exchanged amused looks and clasped their palms together. The blonde covered his plans with a swipe of his hand over his charcoal drawing and said, "Let's get some sleep, it'll be a long day." The group of disobedient slaves all grinned, rolled over, and started to pretend to sleep, and soon the sounds of 3 snorings joined the group as the pale moonlight cast an unsettling shadow on the cell floor. However, one was still absent. What had she just heard? A rebellion? Urza lay motionless, her eyes wide. Naruto sighed deeply and sat up, staring out the cell's lone window at the pale moon and thinking about the past. It was useless. He had heard that war veterans could not close their eyes without experiencing flashbacks, but he had never thought that would happen to him each time he closed his eyes. He saw Neji giving him a feeble embrace before succumbing to his wounds, Hinata slowly dying and going insane, and Shikamaru's last smile before his eyes turned to the sky. It hurt. He found himself wearing the happy mask more and more lately. He sighed again and tried to get his thoughts straight. They were in a better place, he told himself, and he had another mission to accomplish. Speaking of that mission, have trouble falling asleep? Jelal rolled over and moaned as Urza jerked wildly in surprise and kicked him. "You knew I was awake?" With his head still fixed on the night sky, Naruto smiled wanly without turning to face her. "Of course I knew," he said. "Your breathing was anything but calm. You did hear it all, did you not?" Urza sat up, blushed, and reluctantly nodded. "Why, yeah. Don't worry, though, nothing bad will happen to you either, Jelal, or I will be there for you when things get difficult." Naruto tensed at the strange act, then relaxed and simply enjoyed the younger girl's presence. "I'm not worried about that, you idiot," Urza said, grinning slightly before stumbling over next to the blonde and giving him a gentle hug. "I'm concerned that someone will be harmed here. You are the mastermind, in particular, and you will undoubtedly be killed if anyone discovers it." Naruto turned to Urza and held out his arms, saying, "Here, give me a proper hug." He grinned once more, though it never made it to his eyes. "That's why I can't fail." The girl with the red hair flushed and then leaned in, feeling Naruto's powerful arms envelop her and caress her hair. "Go to bed now, our day is going to be long, wah." The last thing Urza saw was Naruto's faded smile as she felt a sharp prick at the back of her neck and her world went black. She clutched at the blonde feebly, but her strength was ebbing quickly. Naruto's fake smile vanished from his face as soon as the smaller girl's eyes fluttered shut. He felt bad for deceiving her, but he didn't want to talk to anyone this late at night, and the girl would need her strength to make the escape. She would wake up later with no recollection of their conversation and only a slight ache in her neck. Naruto turned back to face the small window, gazing at the lovely full pale moon. "Sasuke, what are you up to? It can't be worse than what I'm going through," he said quite softly, as if speaking more to himself than to the Uchiha in question. Lupinous Village, the next morning, with a big smile, Kagura hugged Sasuke's leg and practically prancing up and down. "Nay, Oni-chan. Will we be learning how to swing a sword today?" "You're such a bother," Sasuke said, yanking the young girl away from him and hurling her roughly to the ground. "For once, why can't you be calm? You act like Naruto, but you look like Hinata, geez." The sparkle in Kagura's eyes said, Oni-chan, who are Hinata and Naruto?" Sasuke searched the luggage he had purchased or pilfered. "Naruto is my closest companion, quite noisy and annoying, but dependable when it matters. Blue eyes and the most beautiful blonde hair. Hinata resembles you quite a bit, but was much sweeter and quieter. Now that I think about it, though, she was just as annoying." The Uchiha grinned and carried on searching through the luggage, adding, "Hinata was Naruto's lover." "Really? Fishcake Oni-chan sounds a lot like this Naruto character. Is this Hinata the true lover of Naruto?" He smirked inwardly, anticipating the expression on Naruto's face, adding that it would likely make the late Hinata happy. "Definitely, the girl doted on him since we were your age." His hand accidentally found the long package he had purchased the previous day in the town, and he carefully removed it, saying, "Ah, here it is. This is the sword you'll be using," the Uchiha said, turning to face the young girl and tossing the package to her. "Make good use of it." Expecting a sparkling, shiny katana or at the very least an impressive-looking Chikudo like Sasuke's, Kagura grinned and eagerly tore apart the paper. Her face fell when she saw that what she was holding was a bakken, a crude wooden practice sword, rather than a katana at all. "Why do you wait? Get your sword in a ready position, or you'll get hurt," Sasuke said, clutching a bakken that looked similar in his hands. The ebony-haired girl quickly lost her balance and scurried sideways to regain it. While Sasuke violently knocked her on her head, Kagura gritted her teeth and got to her feet, holding her bakken like she would a baseball bat, roaring and swinging full force at the Uchiha who had just leaned out of the way. "Ow!" she cried, promptly dropped her bakken and cradling her injured head, which was already beginning to grow a bump. "Why would you never drop your weapon in battle?" the Uchiha said, interrupting her grumbling and slapping her over the head once more. This is the first lesson. The second lesson is to never make a mistake, because every conflict is one of life and death, and your actions determine which side you will ultimately support. Sniffling her tears, Kagura charged Sasuke once more, determined to make him cry the way he had made her, and he leaned aside once more, clonking her on the head. Once more. Lesson 3. You are vulnerable to counterattacks if you throw all of your weight into a single blow. Keep an eye on your opponent and adjust your movements accordingly. You move to the right to get closer. If he moves to the left, you take 2 steps forward to make up for his one. Once more. By this time the little black-haired girl was really reaching the end of her already short temper. One could practically see the steam coming out of her head. She let out a shrill bestial roar and attacked again Sasuke's sight and smacked her forehead again. Without mercy. This was going to be a long day. After Kagura had been repeatedly struck with concussions for hours, the girl finally had enough and threw down her wooden bakken, whose blade was still immaculate, since it had failed to strike anything but its wielder's own head. I hate this. I haven't learned anything and all you've done is beat me up, she wailed, pounding her little fists into the grass in frustration. What training did Oni-chan do anyway? I bet it wasn't as bad as mine. In retrospect, the odds were fairly favorable. I was thrown into an arena with 5,000 armed shinobi with nothing but a kunai, not even a shirt, and told to fight or die. Oh, and every time I picked up a weapon or piece of clothing, 100 more people appeared, and every time I was hurt, 50 more people were sent. In took me 2 days without sleep. The Uchiha deadpanned, crossing his arms. Exactly, Oni-chan had it easy. Kagura whined, apparently having completely ignored the Uchiha in favor of her own delusional explanation. Give me a sword. Alright. No, I said really? Kagura asked. Shocked at Sasuke's quick allowance, she managed to hide her surprise under a mask of arrogance and sniffed haughtily. I mean, really now, it was about time. Sasuke threw his sword of Kusanagi at the little girl and crossed his arms, his expression gauging Kagura. Hesitantly drew the sword, staring in awe at the keen edge, and looked back at Sasuke as if asking permission. Can I really use this? She gripped the sword's hilt firmly as she asked. Ignoring the girl's question, the Uchiha stepped in front of her and glared at her. He pointed to his forehead, then pointed at her. If you can do this, then sure, you can. So come one hit, prepare yourself and go for it. He pointed to his forehead and said, strike with all the strength you can muster, right here. When Kagura remained motionless and silent, he pressed her, asking, well, why are you hesitating? Because, are you asking me to kill you? She screamed. How'd I go about doing that? After putting his hands down and scowling, Sasuke took the sword of Kusanagi from Kagura and put the bakken back in her hands. This is the difference between a swordsman and a trainee, he said. Grab your bakken. Without being ready to kill, you cannot learn the art of the sword. Swordsmanship is a means of killing, a way for man to spill the blood of his fellow humans, regardless of the lovely names you give it. However, Kagura looked up reluctantly, surprised to see him give her a small eye smile as Sasuke bent down and put a hand on her trembling head. However, I'm happy you didn't. It indicates that you avoided my error. One day you'll figure out how to cross that line, but for now, have patience. The time will come. Kagura, little steps. The girl with the black hair trembled a little and then smiled tentatively. All right, ow. Now then, who said you could rest? Hurry up, time to slack off, Sasuke said, grinning and giving his palm a light slap with the flat of his blade. With a pained smile, Kagura charged with her bakken, and the clearing was filled with the sound of wood being smacked and passionate cries. A certain old man sat on the edge of the clearing, away from Kagura's eyes and even Sasuke's sharp ones, watching the training session. He wasn't trying to hide, rather, it was his calm and innocent demeanor that allowed him to evade the two's danger radar, so to speak, and his appearance matched his aura. He was short, about Kagura's size, and bald except for a few tufts of hair around the sides of his head. He wore a jester's hat over it to cover his shining dome, and a jacket with stripes in blue and orange. I actually came here to clean up the mess Gildarts left behind, but I think I've discovered 2 more treasures. The girl appears to possess magical abilities, and the boy behaves well beyond his years. Interesting, he thought to himself. Unfortunately for him, Sasuke heard his little conjectures and immediately threw the closest object at the unexpected stranger. The man gave a sharp yelp as the flour bag exploded in a cloud of white smoke and smashed into his face. Makarov scrubbed his now ghost-white face and laughed. Ah ha ha, it seems I've been found out. Stop talking. You won't be able to speak if you don't stand up and explain why you were spying on us. Breathing won't either. Era? In the meantime, the Tower of Heaven? I'm sick of having my pride violated by you. I'll kick your ass if you come at me, you damn slaver. The blue-haired boy had been causing trouble since the morning, refusing to get up in time, rejecting the meal and throwing it out the window, insulting the guards, and disobeying orders to work. The guards had had enough, and the guard on the right nudged the one on the left. The two guards watching over the group of slaves exchanged weary glances. The discipline specialist should be called. He rubbed the bridge of his nose with the hilt of his sword and remarked, "I'm sick of this, let the detention center handle the rest." After taking a step, the other guard hesitated and said, "Are you sure? Isn't that going too far?" He asked. "It's only a child. After all, I've heard that the DS isn't entirely sane and goes way too far." "You're new here, aren't you?" said the guard on the right, dismissively waving his hand. What could possibly go wrong? Of all people, Jelal is someone the specialist knows better than to kill. There would likely be a riot if the boy was killed. As he walked to the communications lacrima across the room, the younger guard acknowledged, "Yeah, I guess you're right. A specialist in discipline?" As it tried to connect itself to the lacrima in the discipline specialist's room, a golden light started to shine on it. However, the light eventually faded and was replaced by the shadowed face in a dark room. "What have you done to bother me? There must be a valid explanation for this," the voice growled. Specialist Sama, I'm calling you regarding a rogue slave," the guard said as he tensed up and felt a chill run down his spine. "My partner thinks your methods will teach the boy, who hasn't listened since the morning." The figure remained motionless. "Sama specialist? Boy, what is your name?" My name's Noba, sir." The guard stammered. He tightened his grip on his sword and gulped. The silence was almost unbearable. "Noba, do you wish to pass away?" With a knife drawn and held in front of the lacrima's screen, the figure whispered. No, sir." The guard sputtered, still terrified of the man despite the knife's inability to hurt him or teleport between lacrima screens. "So why are you phoning me about something so unimportant?" "But I'm in a good mood today, so I'll do you a favor," the specialist growled before stabbing the knife into the wood of his desk with a loud thunk following another painful silence. "How does the boy appear?" With a sigh of relief, the guard said, "It's Jelal, the one with blue hair and the tattoo." The figure froze at that. "That brat? Hasn't the most recent batch of slaves been sent to his quarters, please?" "What? Yes, exactly, the Rosemary Village group, if it helps." The group's leader appears to be blonde with cheek whisker lines. "Oh yes, it does help, quite so," the specialist cackled. He said, "I'll be there in a few minutes." He pushed his chair back and started to turn around, but he hesitated. The specialist then abruptly grabbed the knife from the table and threw it at the lacrima, breaking it on his end and cutting the connection. Incredulously, the guard leapt back and walked uncomfortably back to his post. "All right. How did it go?" the guard inquired. "Dude, I can tell you that guy isn't all there." He shuddered. "However, I suppose I was successful because he consented to come down here." "That's good. We should take our leave, eh? We have about an hour left in our shift." With a shrug, the senior guard turned back to his companion and said, "Yeah, that may be true, but I'd rather take a double patrol later today than have the specialist cut off my arm." "Huh. Let's get together outside." From outside the room, a voice cried out. With a laugh, the guard left without even looking at the slaves, who were unaware of the danger. Before even Jalal's incessant complaining subsided, there was a period of silence. "Naruto? They're gone," Jalal remarked. "Just keep your eyes out," the blonde said, nodding at the blue net without ceasing to work. "You're going to be taken to the detention center by someone. Are you certain you'll be okay?" Jalal gave a firm nod and raised his voice again in loud protest. "I can't take this anymore." The boy's complaints were abruptly interrupted as he screamed, and there was a flash of steel and a knife embedded in Jalal's arm. A voice hissed from the doorway, "Really now, causing such a mess so early in the morning?" A tall, thin, almost grotesque man wearing the standard uniform worn by the tower's guards, a dark cloak with a gold trima, stepped through, fingering the blade of another knife. "You can't take this place. What if I gave you sweethed release?" he exhaled. Naruto growled, "Gushin, he ought to have killed this man as soon as they first met." "What a brat. I'm so happy to see you once more." Gushin laughed and tapped his slightly scarred nose. Even with all the mage core in the tower, they couldn't get rid of the scar. "Why are you in this place?" "Why am I in this place, brat? I work here." He picked up Jelal by the hair and growled, "I'm the discipline specialist, and I've been called here to discipline a certain problem child." Jelal glared at the man through a film of tears. "Gushin, let the boy go." With his fists clenched at his sides, Naruto snarled, "Your quarrel is with me." Gushin only smiled. "Perhaps, but I'm just doing my job. Don't worry, boy, I'll come get you next time. This isn't some random port town. This is the Tower of Heaven, and all of the people here are under my jurisdiction." Urza, a red streak, jumped at the man as the discipline specialist was about to depart, pulling a stumbling Jalal along by his hair. "Oh no, give him up," she shouted, cocking her small fist back, and Gushin kicked her in the stomach after easily catching it. "Well then, I guess I'll be taking this one too." Naruto's eyes flashed red and he gritted his teeth. "Let she go," he growled. "No, I think I'll take them, thank you," Gushin said with a broad smile. "I will only give them minor scratches, so don't worry, brat, I'll save my anger for you." Though her trembling legs betrayed her fear, Urza bravely grinned at Naruto and said, "Don't worry, I won't get hurt, I promise." After making that last remark, Gushin left with the two slaves. In a flash, Naruto created 5 clones. Henge into a tower guard, everyone, and follow the bastard. Spread out Horizon seals as you follow him. One of you should dispel to warn me if Jello or Urza are being hurt or are about to be hurt, and the others should then rush in and murder Gushin. The entire plan is now in jeopardy because I spared him once. The clones said, "Yeah, boss," before transforming and fleeing. Worriedly, Naruto clenched his fist and gazed up at the sun. "Just a few hours more, come on, why did you have to butt in, Urza? For my sake, please don't get hurt." Detention center, 1 hour later. What on earth is he doing? With the Maizaigakyur no Jutsu, hiding with camouflage technique, attached to the detention center's roof, the group of Naruto clones whispered to one another. "The hell if I know," the other said. "All the freak has done this past hour is chain Jello, tie up Urza, and throw knives at a horribly drawn picture of me." The blue-haired boy's skin was covered in red welts from constant whipping, but the clones hadn't bothered to attack Gushin because the wounds appeared to be surface wounds only, barely breaking the skin. In fact, this was preferable to what was planned because Jalal himself had warned the Shinobi not to interfere unless the discipline specialist used crippling force on him. Then another clone said, "I really thought the madman would try to seriously hurt the two. Same, perhaps truly keeping his word that he is reserving his anger for us and won't harm them too much. Given that he has been hurling knives at our photo for the last hour or so, it makes sense my face is essentially non-existent right now." The last clone remarked, "Our face, asshole. Well, be on your guard. The last part of the plan is just a few minutes away, and boss will arrive to get the two of them out of here." The final clone narrowed his eyes and looked out into the ocean through a large window in Gushin's room, saying, I can almost see the boat over the horizon." "Dude, it's going to get rough, isn't it? Explain it to me. When has anything worked out for us?" The Tower of Heaven, the slaves' quarters. As his clones continued to eliminate the approaching guards, Naruto gazed at the small pile of unconscious guards at his feet. Weak, weren't they? He winced when he felt a large group of them pop and quickly made more to make up for it. Another guard joined the pile with a loud thump. Naruto pumped his arms and yelled, "This is it, men. The moment of truth." A huge boat was now approaching us, ready to take us in. "Who among you will fight with me and board the boat? I ask you now. Who among you is going to take up arms and reclaim our freedom?" In the background, Simon palmed his face and exchanged a long-suffering look with Rob. The slaves roared their approval, and the younger slaves shouted mimicry. They were ecstatic because, for the past 10 years, no one had successfully led a slave revolt or defeated the guards, but this young boy had the strength, if the stack of guards at his feet were any indication. "We're entrusting our freedom to this guy. Well, he is strong, I must admit," Rob said, nodding slowly. "Incredibly gifted." Naruto's rallying cry was abruptly interrupted by a loud siren. "There has been a revolt, and all units have deployed to Area 2B. All units deployed to Area 2B, I reiterate." The slaves were frightened, but the blonde merely clapped his hands. "Aha. They took too long. Keep your cool, I'll fight with you." As the thunderous sound of footsteps intensified, Naruto's arrogant, self-assured expression disappeared and was replaced by a more focused, icy expression. "Let's go." His sweeping kick knocked a dozen guards off their feet as he launched himself into the fray. Konoha Reppu, also known as Tree Leaf Gale. Jalal was exhausted, far more than he should have been from a few shallow whip wounds. There must have been some kind of poison in the whip that the clones had overlooked. He looked up and saw the ceiling sections flicker, showing where the clones were. Suddenly, for no apparent reason, he felt resentment. Why were they free while he was tortured? He had volunteered in Naruto's place, but that didn't stop him from thinking bitterly. What was wrong with him? Suddenly, he knew it was unfair. "Well, the 5 minutes are up. It's time to resume your work. Was your brief respite enjoyable?" "This is the Cat O' Nine Tails," Gushin hissed, and the lanky man approached a cabinet to retrieve a larger, more lethal-looking whip. "It still hurts even after I cut off the metal barbs on the ends. All set." When he struck out, Jalal's entire world erupted in agony. "Arrrrrgghgh." He writhed in his chains, screaming as he tried to get away from the blazing whip that sliced through his flesh. Yes, scream, shout, satisfy my thirst for blood. Boy, Uzumaki isn't here to save you. Haha. The sharp smacks of the whip and Jalal's screams complemented Gushin's bloodlust-fueled tirade. They had bet so much on the plan's success that they couldn't afford to fail because he couldn't handle some pain. The blue-haired boy gritted his teeth, but he couldn't stop the low moans that still came from his battered body. He looked up to see the shimmers on the ceiling flicker to reveal a quartet of angry Narutos, and he shook his head slowly, telling them not to come. The clones, with the exception of one that the others had to dispel because it refused to listen and attempted to descend anyhow, stopped and nodded once before vanishing back into the darkness, possibly sensing the fire in his eyes or the sheer resolve. Breathing heavily, Gushin set down the whip, which was dripping red blood. It feels good, doesn't it? He hissed, paused, and looked at the unconscious Urza. It's a shame that I can't kill her, he said. It's a shame she's not awake. The look on her face would be so adorable. Jalal gasped, don't you dare, just leave her alone. She's not involved, you have no right to harm her. Ah, your passion is exhilarating, Gushin said with a malevolent smile. However, the girl won't be harmed if you scream for me because I actually like the screams. Following that joyful note, Gushin kept whipping the blue net, and the air was once again filled with cries of agony. A voice growled in Jalal's mind, what are you doing? This is a disgrace, defend yourself. I have no strength, this is my way of helping the others escape, Jalal said, forming a few coherent thoughts from his screams through the fog of pain. Weak instead of helping others, force them to help you. I give you power, do you take it? I refuse, I am content the way I am. I just want to help my comrades, I don't wish for your power. Sudden offers always come with a price. Despite the blood splattering from freshly opened wounds, the pain from the whips seemed to subside. A self-righteous one, are you? Think again, boy. The power I offer can save your friends, the girl bound next to you. Don't you want to save her? It'll only take a moment, and I will leave, I give you my word, the voice in his head said, laughing for a moment, drowning out his own voices. I say again, I refuse, I will trust Naruto. Who are you anyway, to invade my mind like this? The blue net was briefly influenced by the captivating words, but his resolve was reinforced when he recalled Naruto's gleam of determination from the previous evening. Me? Zarif, if you want, Zarif? Jalal couldn't remember where he had heard the name, but it sounded familiar. Believe me, once we have released your friends, I will depart. After gritting his teeth, the boy with blue hair eventually gave in to the voice's gentle prodding. All right, until then release my friends. The voice seemed to smile, if that were even possible, thank you. A flash of dark purple light caused the whip in Gushin's hand to break in his grasp, and Jalal appeared to be ignited by the violet aura when he opened his eyes. However, they were darker and more malevolent than the typical bright eyes of the young man with blue hair. Yeah, I lied, and I forgot to mention it. In the chaos that was the battle for the tower, or, more accurately, the Shippa, Naruto yelled in frustration, but his cries went unheard. The foolish guards in the towers appeared to proliferate like ants, and despite Naruto's enormous chakra reserves, even he had a limit, which was further compounded by his immature younger body and incapacity to use Sage Mode. In addition, Kurama still hadn't woken up yet. How annoying, in the words of a certain Nara. Ooh-ah-ar. A guard screamed as the charging army of clones unintentionally shoved him out the tower's window. Scratch that, this was a lot more than just troublesome. Boss, the tower's lobby is safe. All we have to do is clear the harbor. A clone yelled, before it popped in a puff of smoke. At least they were winning. Naruto grinned grimly. He had witnessed some of the slaves being killed by the guards, but he was unable to turn around and face them. He had to continue and clear the way for the others. Suddenly a memory leapt unbidden into his mind, the visions of a dispelled clone, all 5 dispelled clones, to be exact, and the visions were all the same, Jalal slaughtering each one of them. His hands and face dyed red with someone's blood. The Uzumaki grit his teeth and quickly turned around. He quickly made a variation of the ram seal and a dozen more clones popped into existence. I want you lot to scout ahead and see what the ship is like, how many more people to fight. How long until we get there? Don't hesitate to dispel before your goal, though, if someone's about to be hurt. Hi, boss. The clones chorused, and left in orange blurs. As he punched another guard into blissful unconsciousness, the blonde let out a sigh. He was getting tired, and his limit was drawing nearer. For almost 4 hours, he and his clones, accompanied by the slaves, had been hammering away at the guards' defenses. Rarg, Naruto cried. Holding out a blue ball of spiraling chakra, the tower's massive gates were blasted off their hinges by the Rasengan. Come on. The end is in sight. The slaves erupted in applause, and the work appeared to double. For freedom, Naruto, however, was too busy to appreciate the slave's advances. He leapt to his feet and affixed himself to a wall. The Uzumaki flashed yellow and vanished. Urza let out a moan. Her head ached terribly. Her vision was still blurry, and she wasn't sure what had woken her up. She held up a hand to block the light, which was brightening quickly, awaiting a hand up. She was bound, wasn't she? The redhead whirled her head from side to side as her eyes snapped open. Jello. The crimson patches that formed a pattern on the cobblestone walls were the first thing the girl saw. Her horrified eyes grew wide. Blood. She jumped to her feet and raised her hands in a defensive position. A voice whispered behind her, "Calm down, there's no danger." Urza turned to see Jelal steadily tossing and catching one of the discipline specialist's knives while seated on Gushin's blood-splattered desk. No, this wasn't Jelal. There was something strange about him, perhaps the intuition of a child. "Jelal?" With a broad smile, the boy hurled the knife in her direction. Her cheek was sliced open as it embedded itself on the opposite side of the room. Rolling on the floor, the red-headed girl screamed and gripped her face. Jelal positioned himself over her with a gleeful cackle. He was a terrifying sight with his face and clothing covered in blood. Still holding her face, Urza whimpered, Jelal, what are you doing? Don't do this, we're friends." "You naive fool." Jelal. "That name means nothing." "Friends? I have none?" Jelal laughed. "Where were you when I was being beat, when I was tortured? Just sitting there watching me." Urza shook her head in denial as she quickly retreated from the insane boy. "No, I was tied up, like you, I couldn't do anything." Jalal's hand went up as his face twisted into a mask of anger. Urza started to levitate by an unseen force. "Shut up." With great care, he aimed another throwing knife at the redhead's face. "Retribution, pain, hatred, that is what I live for. You lot gave me up to die, and so I will offer you to death." The redhead's thrashing grew more intense as Jello cocked his arm back to throw the knife, aiming it straight at Urza's forehead in a fruitless attempt to get away. The door flew open as the possessed boy was ready to hurl the knife. "Urza, Jelal," exclaimed a voice, "are you all right? I came here as fast as possible." Instead of killing the intended victim, the knife sliced open Urza's eye. Tears mixed with the blood streaming down her cheeks as she screamed and thrashed more violently in her restraints. Unceremoniously, Jelal threw her to the red floor and turned to face the intruder. The violence taking place in the room left the newcomer stunned. Simon trembled in surprise as he said, What are you doing, Jelal?" The brunette spat on the ground. He raised his hands, and a bolt of fire shot out of them, racing for the young man. "Tch, another piece of trash. You people multiply like flies." The fireball burst in front of Simon with a crash, but it never quite made it to its intended target. Out of the dying smoke, a figure emerged. Its knuckles turned white with rage as it shook with rage. The dark voice of Naruto said, "What the hell are you doing? Another distraction, just die already." Everyone in the room was pushed into the walls when Jelal raised his hands. Jalal's other hand crackled with blue lightning as he pointed it at Naruto while keeping one hand focused on keeping them in the air. "Just die." Naruto just cocked his head as the lightning crackled in his direction, just where his head had been. The lightning struck the wall. The Uzumaki was covered in burns and scratches and had not survived the blast. Scratches and burns that went away quickly. When Jalal's magic pushed him, Naruto calmly said, "I don't know what's going on, but what you're doing is wrong. I'm going to have to put you down." He then slowly peeled himself off the wall. It is much weaker than Nagato's Shinrei Tensai. The Uzumaki's eyes grew wide as he gazed at Urza's injured form and Simon's struggling form. "Did you do that to her?" Jelal said, "Yes, I did. It's a pretty piece of art." The tense banter between the two seemed to stop as Naruto's eyes darkened. There was a blur, and Jelal lost sight of Naruto. A moment later, the blue-haired boy's face was struck by a fist. Simon and Urza crashed into the ground once more after the pushing magic was cancelled due to shock at the unexpected attack. Gritting his teeth, Jelal launched a barrage of magic at the blonde, ranging from fireballs to lightning bolts to simple Eternino blasts. Jelal grinned as the blonde effortlessly sidestepped the blows. Before charging at its new targets, Urza and Simon, the attack group halted its motion and remained motionless in midair as the attacks burned into the two. There was a cry of agony. Both were unconscious as the dust spread. Simon's jaw, right chest, and arm were irreparably damaged, but Urza managed to escape the attack with only minor burns. Naruto started to get red and screamed, "Jello!" The boy with the blue hair lifted his hands to the sky and cackled. "Yes, that's right. Hate me. Despise me. I live off these emotions. Lord Zareth will be pleased," he yelled. With a flash of yellow light, Naruto charged at Jello once more, his right hand wrapped around a Rasengan, poised to slam into Jalal's abdomen, but it never reached his target because the boy with blue hair just pushed with his hands, sending the Uzumaki hurtling backward. Naruto flew back towards Jalal as he beckoned with his fingers and laughed once more. He struck Naruto in the face with his fist and grinned when he heard the Uzumaki's nose snap. "You idiot, you've spent 4 hours fighting for those ungrateful slaves. You're at your limit. What makes you think you can stand up to me?" Instead of honoring the boy with a reply, the blonde rushed to Jalal once more, growling deep in his throat. 5 more blondes appeared beside Naruto as he quickly sealed his hand with a sly smile. Jalal pushed with his hands in the same way, anticipating that the blonde would fly backward. Once more his eyes widened in surprise when they didn't, and he briefly relaxed his guard. The boy was launched into the air when Naruto appeared beneath him and kicked upward. Each clone swiftly imitated the original, slamming their feet into Jalal's stomach and propelling him upward. When the blue net flicked his hand outward after the 4th clone, the original Naruto reappeared above Jalal to complete the attack. "Dark Force!" he exclaimed fiercely. Jalal and Blonde were both flung backwards, but Naruto was flung backwards more severely with a crash. The Uzumaki struck the ceiling. Dark Grab. Jalal flicked his hand down without missing a beat. Naruto plunged to the ground, creating a tiny crater as he did so. Jalal laughed. "How weak. Do you really think you could defeat me like this?" Naruto clenched his fist and moaned. He swore at his frail body. Jalal was correct in what she said. He had suffered greatly as a result of fighting for nearly 4 hours straight and constantly spouting out Kage Bunshin. He was barely hanging on. A battle between shinobi hardly ever lasted more than an hour, even in the elemental nations. Even with Senjutsu and Kurama supporting him, the battle with Madara had only lasted 6. He was unable to give up, though he was relied upon by all. Naruto reappeared behind Jalal with another Rasengan spinning in his hand after another golden flash. "Shut up. I have to beat you." Odama Rasengan, Big Ball Rasengan. The crazy boy was pushed to the stone floor as the big ball of chakra crashed into Jalal's back. Clinging to his back, Jalal stumbled to his feet. He growled and said, "You annoy me." He extended both of his hands in Naruto's direction, his eyes gleaming crazily. Dark Ray. The mage's fingertips erupted into a beam of dark purple magic that rushed in Naruto's direction. Jalal crossed his hands and then curved back towards Naruto with his dark ray as the Uzumaki leapt up to deflect the blow. When the dark beam struck the blonde, it exploded, and Jalal gave a sneer of satisfaction. "Where's all your determination now, fool?" Next to him, a voice exclaimed, "Phew, that last attack almost got me." When Jalal turned around, she saw Naruto gazing at the explosion's debris. He smirked malevolently and kicked the blue net in the face when he noticed Jalal looking at him. "Kawarimi no Jutsu, substitution technique. What a lifesaver. I humbly thank the log." Ignoring the trickle of blood coming from his nose, Jalal stood up and growled. He suddenly grinned broadly, as though he had a brilliant idea. Naruto stiffened, his hands raised in the standard taijutsu defense stance, uneasy at that ugly smile. With haste, Jalal turned away from Naruto and pumped his hands back and forth while facing the window behind him. "Multi-dark ray," he exclaimed with delight. Dark magic rushes through the window and descends to the slaves engaged in combat below. Both the slaves and the tower guards let out a loud cry of agony as the blasts burned them to ashes. Feeling furious, Naruto hurried over to Jalal and slammed the boy's face into the floor. "What the hell? Why would you do that?" he exclaimed. Jalal gritted his teeth and laughed. "Do you hate me? Do you wish to kill me?" Naruto started to be surrounded by memories of dispelled clones as he continued to beat Jalal. The picture of a young girl frantically running back and forth. The attack mercilessly burned the image of Tiny Tim. The boy Simon had consoled the image of a slave sobbing over his friend's death before being burned, as well the memories of Sho fighting with a wooden club and trying to hold back his tears, only to let them run out when the dark ray destroyed the man next to him. Naruto turned red as his anger boiled up inside of him. He hadn't been this furious in a long time, but Jalal seemed to know how to hit all the right buttons. Red chakra started to slowly bubble up around Naruto's body. His whiskers burned a darker outline on his cheeks, and the blonde's eyes glowed a deep scarlet. Surprised by the erratic chakra, he grunted. It was the bubbling red mass of his younger years, not the golden cloak he had grown accustomed to. He wasn't whining, though it worked, and right now this unpurified, darker chakra suited him more than his golden cloak. He roared like a beast and smashed his clawed fist where Jalal's face was, only to discover it was empty. With a startled growl, Naruto got up to survey the space. "Such volatile, hate-filled power. You'll do well to serve my master," Jalal panted, clutching his face. "If I hadn't replaced myself with a thought projection, I would certainly be dead." The ground shook as Jalal slammed his hands on it. A dark mass emerged from the cobblestone after being carried outside, Jelal immediately started to wreak havoc on the forces below after the possessed blue net. Naruto roared in rage and leapt out of the building. Jelal, I'll kill you. Pain. He was in too much pain to think. He had no idea how he was conscious, much less how he was alive. With his jaw completely destroyed, Simon was unable to even enjoy the satisfaction of being able to scream as he forced himself upright with his unarmed arm. He crawled over to give Urza a tender embrace. I'll protect you, for sure, he told himself. I will not allow you to experience what happened to Kagura. Simon started to ponder as he tenderly soothed the immobile Urza. Everything had gone dark after Naruto's battle started. He only recalled Jalal's deranged attacks and Naruto's terrifying speed. What had become of Jelal? It sounded like a battle continuing from up here, with the explosions coming from below. Under his arm, Urza began to stir. Simon flinched when she raised her bleary eyes to him. Not eyes. Urza's wound was terrible. It was a straight, horizontal cut that only went through the iris of her eye. She gasped at Simon's serious injuries and leapt to her feet as soon as she regained her bearings. Simon, your body, she exclaimed, covering her mouth with her hand. With a tired nod, the boy held up his hand, asking for help to stand with haste. She dropped to her knees and took the boy in her arms. Simon gestured down, put 3 fingers to his cheeks to represent whiskers, and kicked feebly. Downstairs, Naruto and Jello are fighting. Urza nodded, and the two started to walk outside, supporting each other. They are both afraid of what they will discover outside. The floor cracked beneath Naruto's forceful landing. With a swift growl, he gave his clones the order to carry all the remaining slaves to the boat, which was long since guard-free. After sending the order, he turned to see Jello grinning and the terrified guards. He was aware of his disadvantage since his chakra had already depleted and he was now solely dependent on Kurama's. He had to simultaneously defend the boat and the other slaves. Jello was not constrained in this way. The boy with the blue hair opened his hands wide. It was Dark Grab. He cried abruptly. The surrounding guards started colliding with each other after they had all killed themselves. Jello held up his hand and hurled the mass of corpses in Naruto's direction. The blonde made a deep red Rasengan with both hands. After snarling and dodging the bodies, a cloud of dust and debris rose as he slammed one into the ground. Jelal swore, put up a hand to protect his eyes from the stony shrapnel, and started firing sporadic dark rays. Unfortunately for the Uzumaki, he had to stop his assault and retreat to save the slaves because many of the dark beams were aimed at them. In order to protect the slaves in his place, he created 2 more clones, each of whom had a red chakra cloak similar to his own. But by then, the dust had settled, and Naruto had lost the opportunity. Jello beckoned with his finger while grinning. He uttered the words, Dark Grab. Naruto was propelled through the air in the direction of Jello, who was prepared with a fistful of darkness magic. Naruto righted himself in midair and charged another Rasengan, determined not to fall for the same ruse. The surrounding tower guards were blown back by the massive shockwave created by the collision of the Scarlet Rasengan and the Fist of Darkness magic. However, Naruto's attack, which was much more concentrated, swiftly outclassed the mage's. Jelal struggled backwards to regain his balance. After his hand was blown backwards, Naruto seized the opportunity to put his fist inside Jalal's stomach. A stream of blood spurted from the possessed mage's mouth as he vomited with a feeble curse. He twitched a finger in Naruto's direction, releasing a tiny beam of dark magic that just barely made it through the crimson chakra cloak. Unusually, Naruto snarled and pointed a finger with claws beneath Jalal's chin. All it would take is a push upwards, and your brain would be mush. Tell me, why did you betray your friends? With a sneer, Jelal spat a drop of blood onto Naruto's face. Friends? Bah, they're just tools to revive Lord Zareth. Suppressing his anger, Naruto closed his eyes. I see. Goodbye, Jelal. I enjoyed getting to know you, at least before you turned corrupt. With his teeth clenched, Naruto was ready to stab upward. Poof! The volatile chakra that surrounded him abruptly vanished, making him weaker than before. In addition, all 2,000 of the clones he had made exploded into non-existence, unable to sustain themselves any longer due to Naruto's exhausted chakra. What? Naruto gasped, collapsing to his knees due to the abrupt loss of strength and clutching his head due to the sudden weariness and pain from his clones. Nevertheless, he was able to stay conscious. Jelal struggled to his feet after being released from his chokehold, wiping his bloody mouth and grinning maniacally. It appears that luck is on my side, he said. It's unfortunate that your amazing power didn't endure. However, right now, like you were going to end me, I'm ending this. The combination of fighting a superpowered Jelal and fighting the Tower Guard army alone had left Naruto completely exhausted, unable to move his body at all, much less go toe-to-toe with crazy again. Jelal cackled, but his arrogant words didn't match his battered body. and he raised a shaky hand that started to glow with a flickering dark amethyst. Naruto muttered a curse and attempted to clench his fist, but nothing happened. Goodbye. Naruto, I enjoyed getting to know you. It is unfortunate that you have to be sacrificed for Lord Zeref's glory. Jelal was about to swing his hand down to kill the blonde when he was startled by a scream and had to lean back to avoid a sword that was flying in his direction. No. Quit. Jelal turned to the newcomer calmly and said, Urza and Simon, two, you don't look good, do you, friends? You're not my good friend, Jelal, you monster. I'm not sure what happened to him no longer. Urza snarled and placed Simon gently on a heap of debris, saying, I can't let this stand. Between fits of bloody coughing, Jelal let out a loud laugh. And what are you going to be able to do? Even though I'm weak, I can still kill a helpless girl like you. He moved his hand to indicate Urza, who was trembling, though it was unclear if this was out of fear or rage. Dark Ray. Jelal grunted in surprise as another bolt of amethyst energy shot towards Urza, but before he could react, one of the swords that had been impaled in the ground flew out and cut the blast in half. Another dozen weapons started to float in midair and rushed towards him, so he quickly shot his arm out and screamed. Damn it. Evil power. He managed to deflect the majority of the weapons away, but two managed to slip past his guard and nicked his arm and cheek. Jalal's face twisted into an expression of barely controlled rage, and he spread both his arms wide, completely ignoring the stabs of pain from all the injuries surrounding his body. Shit. Did she possess magical abilities? Why are there so many issues? Help me, Lord Zeref, Cannon of Darkness. A massive blast, many times the size of a normal dark ray, erupted from Jalal's bloodstained hands, reaching the height of his entire body. Despite its enormous size, the ball of death moved quickly and swiftly across the gap between Urza and itself, and all Naruto could do was watch as it hurtled towards the girl he had come to care for, the first girl he had met in this new world and the only person he could call a little sister. Not caring that the stump of his arm was starting to gush blood again, Simon cursed in his head and let out a low moan as he crawled desperately towards Urza, who was calling sword upon sword in an attempt to block the attack. Urza's vision was filled with the ethereal glow of the dark cannon, and there was no way out, so she closed her eyes, cursed softly, and prepared herself for the pain that would come. Every sword she swung broke and disintegrated, not even deterring the attack in the slightest. There was none. Urza opened an eye and gasped, realizing that although she was unharmed, someone else had suffered far more severe injuries. The cacophony of the slaves' battle, which was by now all but one, seemed to subside, leaving only a lone cry of despair. Why, Rob? Naruto wailed, slamming his head against the rocky floor, not caring that his face began to stream down blood. Damn it. Why is this happening? I wish I had more strength. Cammy, you said this would be simple. What was wrong with me? Urza was still staring at Rob with a mixture of shock and horror when Rob smiled kindly down at her. From the front, everything appeared to be fine. It was just Rob, smiling benignly, but from the back, things were different. The old man's back was covered in blackened skin, which at this point was barely identifiable as skin at all, more like blocks of coal. It was a miracle he was still alive. Then the spell was broken, and Urza started to cry and scream, tears streaming down her face at Rob's sacrifice. Until the very end, Rob's smiling face remained unchanged, as if he were not hurt, as if he were not dying, and he admonished, Don't cry, little Urza. This was my choice, he said. My eyes have been opened by Naruto-kun. He is correct in saying that we must create opportunities for ourselves. Tell him that it's not his fault and that he shouldn't blame himself. I should never have involved you kids. It was mine. I ought to have stopped this long ago, but now that I know I can trust, I'm happy. A line of blood ran down the side of Rob's mouth as he coughed violently. Rob, don't talk. You've done enough, so just relax, please, Urza cried, her voice cracking. No, little one, Rob said, shaking his head gently. Listen to me. Listen to this old man's final ramblings. I can't sleep at night unless it's said. This isn't Jelal. I don't know what happened to him, Urza. Only you can save him. Live a good life until you're as old as I am. Have no regrets about the past. Last but not least, remember friendship and love above all else. That may sound cheesy, but that's my heart and ideal, and you have my trust. Rob's monologue ended, leaving only Urza's sobbing and Naruto's loud cries as he repeatedly slammed his head against the ground to break the stillness. Even in death, the old man's expression remained the same, beaming down reassuringly. For the first time since the battle, Jalal's expression appeared to be indecisive, as if he was unsure whether to laugh or cry. After a few minutes of silence during which neither side acknowledged the elder's passing, Jelal finally spoke. I've finished playing. Dark grab. Unaware of the unexpected attack, he swung his arm once more, sending Naruto and Urza flying into a small rowboat that started to float slowly away in the waves after both of them were rendered unconscious by an invisible blow to the head. Jalal's crazy smile vanished as he gazed at the boat as it started to float farther and farther away until it was just a dot in the horizon. The next time we cross paths, Uzumaki Naruto, you will die for Lord Zareth, you are much too unstable. The brunette noticed that his arms didn't seem to obey him, and gradually darkness filled his vision as he turned his back on the boat and limped back towards the castle before stumbling forward and falling face first in the jagged rock footpath. The town of Lupinus with a sharp cry of pain, Sasuke winced and clutched his head. How are you, Oni-chan? Should I strike the old man again? Is it his complaints? Kagura inquired. It's not him, Kagura, the Uchiha said, shaking his head in any case. He has no malicious intent. Now is the time to untie him. Kagura gave a sharp nod, saying, and hurried to untie Makarov, who had long since given up whining after realizing its pointlessness and was now sulking in private. At last, leaning back and wincing at the cracks and pops in his back, he complained, I swear, if I didn't know you two weren't harmless, I would have given to two of you such a beating but I'm a guild master, I should get some respect. Hello, are you paying attention? However, Kagura was not at all. Instead, she was looking anxiously at Sasuke, who had been silently gazing up at the sky. How is Oni-chan doing? She repeated her question, but got no answer. Sasuke placed his hand on his sore head. Are you okay, Naruto? I thought I saw something, he thought quietly as a wave of uneasiness swept over him. What's happening here? Midnight, hours later, unknown shore. Urza sputtered and gasped. Regaining consciousness, she quickly spun around and became aware of her surroundings, realizing that she was at a beach surrounded by rather large rocks, that the boat's remnants were all over the place, probably destroyed during its journey onshore, and that it was a miracle they were still alive. Images of dying slaves, a bleeding and injured Naruto, a crippled Simon, and a mad Jalal suddenly jumped into her mind, causing her to groan and grab her head. Of a Rob who was dying, Urza clapped her hands over her ears and screamed loudly, as if she could block out the screams of pain in her head, overwhelmed by the barrage of negative sounds and images produced by her traumatized psyche. Adrenaline had prevented her from being affected at the time, but now it was all coming back to haunt her, the memories of a crippled Simon without arms, the first time she killed a guard, which seemed to activate her magical powers, and the first time she had witnessed someone close to her die in front of her. She cried repeatedly, trying to forget those images, those horrific images. Well, Urza moaned softly and wept. It hurt so much that I couldn't handle it. She rolled into a ball and wept silently, attempting to forget and use her tears to wash away the nightmares. Hours went by, and Urza's sobs gradually turned into erratic hiccups, but she was still curled into a ball, and the only thing keeping her from crying again was remembering Rob's last words of wisdom. Are you done yet? The night was silent until a growling voice broke through. With haste, Urza got to her feet and leaned against a rock, gazing at the shadowy figure before her. Who are you? The light glowed on the figure's face as he stepped forward, revealing blonde hair, whisker lines, and a ragged orange jumpsuit, with the exception of glowing crimson orbs in place of the sapphire eyes. Naruto? Disgustingly, Naruto snarled. Try again, Kurama is the name. Urza stepped back, nervously. K. Kurama? She muttered. Kurama growled in Naruto's body while twisting his face. K. Kurama. Yes, that is my name, he said in a high falsetto. Mockingly, are there any more pointless inquiries? What are you and what happened to Naruto? Urza swallowed and set her jaw after taking another step back and gasping slightly as her back struck a big boulder. Kurama used a clawed hand to palm his face. That fool. I'm filling in since he's not feeling well right now. I haven't yet seen a more foolish scheme. By the 6 paths, he went against a whole tower without me. What was he thinking? I think Brad got what he deserved. Perhaps he will truly think the next time. That is untrue. Urza yelled, then covered her mouth with her hands and gave the Naruto who wasn't Naruto a very pitiful look. And, Brat, what do you know? Rather than stealing my chakra, he ought to have waited for me to awaken until I cleanse it. He is aware of how poisonous my chakra is. Brat, think would you have been so careless with this power? Urza's eyes rolled back into her head as Kurama unleashed a blast of killing intent from his chakra, causing the little redhead to fall in a heap on the rocky beach. Kurama looked down at his error and muttered, unrepentantly, oops. He then lay down on the ground and looked up at the night sky. Well, it is more peaceful without her screaming, he said, purposefully ignoring a particular incident at a particular tower. It's as Kami says, this world really is serene. The land that would become Fury 300 years ago. He let out a racking cough, wincing as every breath sent a sharp spear of pain through his lungs, but he persevered. This wouldn't kill him. Oh no, if Hashirama couldn't do the deed, there was little chance a pair of greenhorn children could. He scrabbled blindly, feeling his surroundings, ignoring the protests of every limb in his body. There was no soft grass, no soft ground for him to rest his head. Every sharp pebble in what appeared to be a desolate wasteland seemed determined to pinch into his hands and knees. The Uzumaki actually realized his pipe dreams. The Uchiha betrayed his own bloodline, the nine-tailed beast disobeyed its rightful master, and he collapsed. Unable to support the weight of his own body any longer, he swore loudly and cursed them for their insurgence and arrogance. The man lay face down, feeling his surroundings with a feeble tendril of chakra, which was confirmed by the unknown landscape his chakra painted. Where had he gone? Even without his sight, he knew this place was unknown to him. It was neither Konoha nor any place in the elemental nations. No, he had visited those places numerous times and had committed to memory every road that was worth learning while he was getting ready. What had become of him? The brat's technique had cut deep, far deeper than should have been permitted had his eyes not been destroyed, and he hissed, pressing a palm against his chest to compress the terrible wound. The man's only memory was the conclusion of the last battle. As much as he hated to admit it, the boy had won this round. He muttered another curse. If it weren't for his eyes, the fight would have been just another game for him. But that Uzumaki and his damnable luck. The last dragon attack was unthinkable. It shouldn't have been possible for both brats to combine such volatile jutsus, and yet, he was the one dragging himself to the ground. Damn it all. He grit his teeth and began to drag himself along the ground again, leaving a wet trail of blood behind him if the slickness on his hands were any indications. To think that the anima would lead me to you, Madara. Who are you? Madara gasped and twisted his body painfully in the direction of the sound, reaching out blindly with his chakra and staring straight at the strange figure in front of him. He rasped. The figure stared down at him, before crouching down in front of his sightless eyes. After a while, he simply said, "Interesting, you really do look my father to think that fate would send me something this troublesome." Madara gave a low growl and then heaved dryly, saying, "Do heathen, don't ignore me. You, who are you?" The figure tapped his staff in the ground, humming softly, "I'm sure you know the answer to that question. Does my voice not sound familiar? Avoid playing games. I would have no. You should have died. You died with me. There's no way you survived. I saw how deeply your own technique cut. You, Uchiha, are not Aarrghh." Madara screamed loudly at the pain, and the figure appeared to smile, his onyx eyes sparkling, before slamming his staff onto Madara's wound and twisting it. "Silence, you talk too much. This is not the elemental countries, Madara," he said, carefully taking off his staff and sponging the red liquid onto Madara's ripped garments. "You must be familiar with alternate dimensions, right?" The brat obviously had the upper hand here, so it was best to pretend to be friendly for the time being. Madara took a ragged breath and carefully compressed his reopened wound. This is Daedalus? So you are not as ignorant as I thought," the stranger said, laughing out loud. "But no, great Uchiha." "Eh?" The figure scoffed. "This is Earthland. Its counterpart Kamui gave you access to Daedalus, but not this place. And how is it? Bought any souvenirs?" Madara swung a feeble fist at the man, but the stranger's staff instantly pinned his hand. Do not mock me, boy. I hold your life in my hands. Old man, why do you continue to antagonize me?" The figure let out a sigh, and prodigal Uchiha heard the man leaping down and perching on the jagged rocks. The man asked casually, as though discussing the weather rather than lifelong servitude, "Will you serve me? You can no longer see, and the Uchiha's eyes are his life. What use are you now?" There was no hesitation. "Go kill yourself, you damn pest. I bow to no one. Let me recover in peace." With another sigh, the figure drove his staff back into Madara's chest wound. Grinning a little at the screams that came out, he inquired after the Uchiha's cries subsided to the usual heaving. "And if I grant you eyesight and immortality?" Madara felt his breath catch in his lungs. His blind, lifeless eyes appeared to light up. "Where would you find the power to do this?" With a chuckle, the stranger raised his hand and lit a small orb in it with a spell. The magic's sheer force made the air heavy in front of them, and it buzzed softly with the intensity of a tiny sun. He gently poked the orb with the head of his staff and asked, "Can you feel it? This power should be proof enough. Madara, do you accept?" Madara remained quiet for some time. He was reluctant to concede to a brat who should have been far beneath him. Uchiha Madara was his name. Despite his unbelievably severe injuries, he maintained his pride. And his pride was not as valuable as his eyes. At last, he said, "Do it." Once he regained his vision, he could always destroy the haughty sapling. The figure pushed the ethereal ball into Madara's chest after appearing to smile and sigh softly in satisfaction. "It is done." Madara scowled after waiting, then let out a scream even though the pain was excruciating and much worse than anything he had experienced so far. He was unable to drift into blissful unconsciousness. He hissed violently as the skin repaired itself, and he screamed as his wounds started to heal. His bones creaked and reformed, stronger and more confident, and he screamed while the other laughed at his suffering. He screamed. Still, nothing was taking place. The world remained a gloomy black, devoid of color, depth, vision, and a weight. A pale white light began to appear in the middle of his vision. Amidst the oppressive blackness that gradually and painfully widened, the oldest Uchiha started to discern the tiniest glimpse of the surroundings. He blinked quickly in an attempt to clear his blurred vision. His blood-stained hands would be useless in this situation. He coughed, and to his surprise, it sounded like a growl. He grated, "I suppose thanks are in order." The figure behind Madara said icily, "No need, you are now under my command, after all." To get a clear view of the boy, the Uchiha cocked his head. He had on a silky white toga that was wrapped around a high-collared robe with gold trim. The tip of the twisted wooden staff he was holding was red with Madara's blood. However, the face, yes, it was the same angry face with its glittering black eyes that had previously made fun of him. But there was a problem. He was very little, as if reading his thoughts. The traitor Uchiha retorted, "Or you are extremely big. Take a good look at yourself. Madara, the strongest man in the world now, you may not be a man at all." He did so and was taken aback by what he saw. He didn't feel any different, but his body certainly did. Ironclad black scales, punctuated only by the occasional blue, crisscrossed his body, replacing his soft tanned skin and etched together to create complex patterns behind him. A thick tail with a big spike at the end swished back and forth, revealing the flexing muscles beneath the gray underside. He mumbled, flinching at the guttural tone, "I am a beast." Ah. Dragons are proud creatures. They don't take kindly to being called beasts at all," the traitor scolded, raising a finger. Madara tensed up. "A dragon?" he uttered softly, startled. The brat would be easily crushed underfoot when he lunged at him. How dare you turn me into a beast?" "I am." The boy's little speech was abruptly cut off when he raised his hand, sealing Madara's movements. "Quite tired of listening to your roars. Let us talk cordially for a while longer. While you are still capable of speech, just a moment longer, all memories of Uchiha Madara will vanish, and Acknowledgia, Dragon of the Apocalypse, will be born, and at a just time too. Who better to end these dragon wars than a human-turned dragon?" He continued casually, as if the two were familiar faces. With his newly developed draconian muscles flexing mightily, Madara fought against his invisible bounds, but to no avail. "What nonsense do you speak of?" An eyebrow was raised by the figure. "Oh. So fate has not briefed you on what is happening? Ah. Well, a reason for me to ramble. I never get time to speak to people. You see, I'm too busy killing." "Oh yes, the wars. Simply put, too many have died in this meaningless struggle, such that the balance between worlds are in danger, and my attempts to stop them are of no use. Human deaths are at quite the number. I lost count at the first milliona, and the demons have created are no match against dragons, and that is where you enter, Madara. If demons cannot defeat dragons, then surely another dragon can. So you intend to use me? You make it sound like a bad thing. Madara, I'm helping accomplish good in that evil life of yours. Granted, I'm not very good myself, but I try my best. What is your plan, brat?" The boy gave a sardonic response while bowing. "Me. I'm supposed to end this war. Fate-sama has already begun." "What is Thea? What was it again?" "Oh yes, the first Shinobi war in your world. To account for all the deaths here, I suppose you're her next weapon of choice." However, Madara had long since stopped paying attention. He started roaring wildly and flailing more violently against his confines. Muscles twitched wildly. His pale, white eyes glared at the younger boy. He gasped in between roars, already sensing his consciousness ebbing away. "Who are you?" "Uchiha Sasuke, agent of Fate-sama Kami. I think you people call Hera, and appointed protector of the humans, of course. What with the number of people I've killed, I'm more likely to be known as the Dark Mage of Death." How unoriginal. It's not even catchy. I suppose the name Uchiha Sasuke doesn't mean anything anymore. Nobody even remembers the name except for one, and she would gladly kill me for what I've done. Perhaps in remorse for what was happening. Sasuke grinned bittersweetly as he looked up at the flailing Madara without Acknowledgia. "Well, if you're being reborn, I might as well do the same." Madara was driven solely by his hatred for the boy in front of him as he raged, his human mind barely containing the ferocious beast. Sasuke's eyes flashed a deep crimson, and his faint, jaded smile vanished. "Goodbye, Madara, and hello, Acknowledgia. My name is Zareth, the Black Wizard." Thus, the beast defeated the human. Today's time. Morning in Lupinus Village. Kagura stretched her body like a cat and woke up with a loud yawn. She grinned broadly as she looked up at the clear blue sky and noticed a certain person sleeping on a tree branch. "Good morning," she exclaimed. "You are K, a crash." With a bitter groan, Sasuke withdrew a branch from his hair. He frowned at the happy girl before taking out a letter and tossing it in her direction. He whispered to himself, "You're cheeky today, aren't you? We'll see how much energy you have left after training." Sasuke's voice rose. He grunted as he got up and went to the supply stash he had stuffed in a hollow tree, looking for an extra shirt. "Read that, it's for you from the old man." When Kagura noticed a bundle of rope close to the tree trunk, she looked around and sighed in disappointment. With a dejected sigh, she said, "Figures it was a little too quiet this morning. I wonder why he left." Sasuke muttered as he put on a black shirt. "It may have something to do with the fact that you tied him up twice, once for sneaking up on us, then again for being so damn obnoxious." With a sigh, he pushed his head through the shirt. Reaching for a blue jacket with a high collar, he added after the fact, "and that you threw a bag of flour at him." Sputtering angrily, Kagura waved the letter. "It was on your orders. And you're the one who threw the bag of flour at him. Don't go around blaming other people," she gasped. Lightly scoffing, Sasuke laid down on a fallen tree trunk and fastened his sword of Kusanagi. He muttered, "TCH, what a waste of good flour. So, are you going to read the letter, or are you just going to stand there and fight an argument you've already lost?" The younger girl started to say something, probably something critical, but she changed her mind and opened the letter instead. He was foolish, not her. She glanced briefly at the paper before gasping and clutching the letter tightly. "No way!" she exclaimed joyfully. The girl's sudden enthusiasm made Sasuke frown. He gave a sharp order. "What? Read the paper aloud." Kagura cleared her throat. "Greetings, sword-happy young lady." Was it Kagura? Was it Sasuke? They have strange names and it's impossible to tell if they're male or female. "Well, I'll call you little girl." "So, little girl, I'm probably long gone from here if you're reading this. Assuming you can read at all, I'm hoping you'll be a little less aggressive when I see you again. If my guild is any indication, it is unlikely, but one can hope." "My guild? I'm writing to inform you that you have a lot of magical potential and that you are always welcome to join my guild. Fairy tale. Other than that, my former friends are also leaders of other guilds. It would be sad to witness such talent wasted. Tell your brother that he's also welcome. He seems strong on his own, but I don't sense any magic from him. He just twitched in his sleep. See, I'm about to take a leave of absence." "Hello. Makarov Drayar, Fairy Tale's old man guild master. I stole some food. By the way, I hope it's okay with both of you. There are only a few tomatoes." Kagura puffed out her chest and looked up expectantly, probably hoping the older boy would give her some kind of compliment. "And, I don't know what you're expecting from me. You want a cookie? It's in the tree somewhere with the rest of our food," Sasuke replied bluntly. Kagura became noticeably deflated. Speaking of, the Uchiha went to the hollow tree and took out a box of tomatoes, which was mostly empty except for one shriveled tomato. Sasuke's lips were tightly pursed. "I'm killing the man, the next we meet." He pulled out his sword of Kusanagi, sheath and all, and charged at Kagura. "Come on. The sun's been up for a while now. Training first, then talk." Said girl yelped, tumbling backwards, and scrabbled towards her Bakken, which was thankfully only a few feet away. She kicked an agitated kick in Sasuke's general direction. After barely parrying the subsequent blow, it missed entirely. She complained, leaping back to prevent a board slash at her midsection. "You completely missed the point. The part about me having magic," she exclaimed. "What about it?" she screamed, nursing her aching head. "Well, ow. Are you trying to kill me?" and launched a barrage of wildly inaccurate blows at Sasuke, who merely ducked by taking a step to his side. "Well, shouldn't we make a visit to one of the guilds or find out how to train my magic, since the letter said you didn't have any?" Sasuke said curtly. "No need." The Uchiha pulled out his sword and slashed Kagura's Bakken in half, releasing a burst of murderous intent. "If your magic is anything like my Sharingan, then all it'll take is for me to put you in grave danger. Simple enough." Kagura's face paled at the blatant display of power. She backpedaled furiously, letting out an involuntary gasp when the Chikudo cut a large chunk of wood out of the tree next to her, abandoning all pretense of strength. Kagura turned tail and ran, completely forgetting her lessons with Sasuke. She hid behind a tree quite a distance from the Uchiha and gasped, "You need a therapist, but first you owe me a new sword." With a sigh, Sasuke put his sword away. The girl was far too accustomed to him to be afraid of him. All she needed was for her tiny brain to understand that he was a formidable opponent. Correct. After turning around, he made a crude storage seal for the remainder of his supplies. "Let's go. You're obviously too close to me for me to scare you, and it'd be a waste to kill you now. Let's visit that old man. He owes me tomatoes already." Did the letter give any mention of where to find him? With hesitation, Kagura emerged from behind the tree and shook her head. Her response was, "No idea." Sasuke palmed his forehead and exhaled. Every single one of them as an idiot. He assumed Naruto would blend in perfectly with the group. Unknown location. Hours later, Kurama stretched his limbs and let out a loud groan. He might as well claim Naruto's body as his own for as long as he was living in it. Even though it wasn't his own magnificent fox form, it was still better than nothing. He glanced down at the small red-haired girl's prone form in an attempt to get a response. He knelt down and repeatedly tapped her forehead. He was so bored. My god. Additionally, knocking on her head repeatedly would likely make her unconscious for longer. What did he care about? After closing his eyes for a brief moment to check Naruto's status for the millionth time, Kurama discovered the boy in what appeared to be a fitful sleep. At intervals, the blonde let out a cry and muttered apologies as silent tears trickled from his closed eyes. He cried out for both the people he had failed to save in the tower and the fallen in the Shinobi War, as if he had somehow merged his two worlds in some perverse nightmare. Despite his insult to the boy, Kurama still showed concern for the young Jinchuriki, so he looked away from the scene. He sighed, vaguely hearing a scream, and stepped back into the world. He searched for the scream's owner, scanning the rocky beach and the thinned forest farther on. Kurama scowled as he bent to pick up the child with the red hair and started to cross the beach, listening for any strange noise. He was spared a long wait. It was the helpless rage of a young boy. This time Kurama bared his sharp teeth in a low growl. In other words, there were multiple. Instead of holding the girl in his arms, he slung her over his shoulder and hurried to the location where the sound had come from. Argabfaba. Avoiding a blow to the head, Kurama swore and twisted his body back. In order to protect the red-haired girl from harm, he made sure to hold her tightly. When he landed roughly on the forest floor with a fierce snarl, he turned to face the horde of ape-like animals and leopard-like cats that surrounded him. Kurama snarled and menacingly cracked his clawed hands, asking, "And what might you be?" The gorilla creature gave a brief howl, "Oagabuga," and emphasized it by pounding his chest. It and the other members of its pack charged forward together in response to an invisible signal, all of them aiming for the innocuous-looking blonde boy in front of them. A shadow flashed, leapt from behind a tree, and shot down toward Kurama with the intention of killing him as they started to overwhelm his form. Kurama huddled over the young girl's unconscious body, grinning slightly as each blow bounced off his skin when he felt a powerful force, much stronger than the soft taps of the beasts around him, erupt on the small of his back. His smirk turned into a broad smile. "And just as I was getting bored with this world," he said with a soft growl, his upper lip curling into a broad smile. He tensed and pursed his lips, releasing a chakra shockwave in front of him. His attackers all flew away, crashing into rocks and trees as a red mass started to engulf his body, darkening the whisker lines and lengthening his canines. Kurama got to his feet and grinned broadly. He watched as the bubbling mass formed a layer over his clawed hands and sighed with relief. "Ah, much better. Naruto might prefer my purified chakra, but nothing feels as exhilarating as the raw power my original chakra deals." He took a moment to breathe. He asked himself out loud, "Is that narcissistic to feel that way about my own power?" His thoughts were interrupted by a voice that said, "Hardly, I feel the same." Kurama noticed a figure standing far away when he looked up. It appeared to be a young girl wearing a dark crimson robe. A pair of black bat-like wings emerged from her back, and her silver hair billowed in an imaginary breeze. The only difference between her hands and his was that she was holding a golden metal gauntlet with sharp spears on each digit, rather than an ethereal crimson one behind her. A thick, reptilian tail fluttered from side to side, giving the impression that it was quite menacing. If the girl had been older than the prepubescent 10-year-old that she appeared to be, it would have. After swiftly decapitating a beast that had gotten too near the Urza girl Naruto appeared to like, Kurama questioned, "Are you the leader of these beasts?" At her feet, its head rolled to a stop. Her eyes widened slightly, more shocked that a blonde child could kill someone so easily than that her subordinate had passed away. She gave him a disgusting kick to return the head. After a moment of shock was replaced by a sneer. The ape-like head changed into a basic human head as it flew through the air. Kurama grabbed it and looked at it. It was the head of a middle-aged Mana, not particularly noteworthy, but also not particularly dangerous. He expected to see the same body he had killed when he looked down at the body at his feet, but instead he saw a normal human body dressed in a basic cotton dress shirt and pants. He crushed the head in his hands and tossed the remains aside, growling, "What sorcery is this?" The leopards and monkeys retreated nervously, muttering incoherently to one another. She glibly responded, seemingly amused at his perplexity and subsequent violence, "Take over magic. The monkeys are Vulcans and felines are were-tigers. They both possess the ability to take over the body of a person they choose. I am, yes, The de facto leader of these idiotic beasts. I am Lord Furfur, Earl of the Demon Realm, the 26th demon created by Lord Zerf. With a bored expression due to the current lack of activity, Kurama interrupted, saying, "Hold on, Lord. You look like a female to me. Furry, what are you? An Okama, transvestite?" Long conversations were never his style. "It's Furfur," said the youngster, "and I'm a male. I just take the form of the possessed. This girl has great magical power. She was the only one I could find that was strong enough to withstand my power but untrained enough to not reject me." Kurama's back cracked and his spine popped, causing him to groan slightly. "So you're saying that you're too weak to possess anyone actually strong, and too useless to even form your own body? Arg. I was created to cause mayhem through possession, you insult." A crash. Kurama grinned broadly and held out his fist. He gleefully watched as the demon crashed into the tree's trunk and blasted straight through to the person behind that, and the person behind that, and the person behind that. He turned to the horde of beasts surrounding him and remarked, "I'm getting tired of hearing you speak. Come on. Show me what you have. I've spent too much time cooped up inside." With a howl, the Vulcans charged at him, wildly swinging their arms at the blonde with a loud roar. The weretigers followed suit. Kurama gave a cruel smile, careful not to burn her with the volatile chakra. He lifted the Urza girl and wrapped her in one arm after making a hole in his red cloak. Kurama opened his mouth wide and said, "Ready." A tiny, dense black ball started to form, absorbing both positive and negative energy from his surroundings. Kurama swallowed the ball as it started to shrink to the size of a pinball. The ball's added mass was too much for the ground to support, and it cracked into a huge crater beneath him. Wincing as the pressure threatened to blow backwards, Kurama allowed the volatile mass to fester in his maw. When he finally opened his mouth, the world burst into a sea of white light as the blast erupted. From what the fox could see through the dense cloud of upturned dust, everything around Kurama had been wiped out. When the glow faded, the term forest was no longer appropriate. Wasteland would be a more accurate description. Every weretiger and Vulcan was completely destroyed by fire. They turned into a charred mess before they had even had time to return to their human forms. A wave of nausea swept over Kurama, and he coughed roughly. His red cloak retreated back into his skin as he fell to his knees. He took a deep breath to catch his breath and coughed, saying, "That took a lot more out of me than I thought." Through the thick cloud of debris, he saw a dense shape, and he grunted in surprise. With a steady arm around the Urza girl, who had survived the blast largely unscathed, Kurama rose slowly to his feet. As the dust gradually settled, a luminous black shield emerged. Was it made of pure chakra, or was it magic? It was several meters in diameter. If the many cracks in the spider web were any indication, the shield had been severely damaged. Furfur, weretiger, and a tiny pair of surviving Vulcans were visible when the shield dropped. It was a testament to them that they had even survived the blast, even though they all had nursing burns of differing severity. Furfur blanched at the unrecognizable corpses that had once been his minions and gasped in shock as he took in the devastated landscape in front of him. "What kind of monster are you?" he asked. "You killed all of them, have you no mercy? They were all still human?" Kurama gave a sinister grin. Companionship with Naruto had mellowed him out quite a bit, but a good amount of bloodshed now and then was sorely appreciated. And what does someone like me care for a human? That's not my job. With the fear of death fully linked to the menacing blonde in front of them, Furfur retreated, and his other two beasts soon followed, whimpering. But the red-haired girl in your arms, she is human, isn't she? I have never seen Lord Zeref ever create a demon in such a form. Are you not human?" With a shrug, Kurama walked slowly in the direction of the now pathetic-looking trio. Kurama abruptly vanished from view and reappeared behind the group, saying, "She is under the brat's protection, and so I am honor-bound to do the same. Plus, she can actually take care of herself or has some serious luck if she was able to survive the same battle that Naruto got out of. And God knows we need luck." He intensified his desire for blood, causing the weretiger and Vulcan to collapse as their eyes rolled back into their heads. There was just one more thing to do. Angry at the demon's sudden fear, Kurama growled, "Come on, if you're going to die, take some pride and go down fighting." Furfur now had a nearly catatonic appearance. "Now hold on, let's not be hasty," he begged. "The host, this girl would make a fine friend for the red-haired one. She can always make another." Kurama strode forward undeterred, ignoring the demon's desperate attempts to grasp at straws. A clawed hand that started to glow softly red was raised by him. Furfur backed away frantically, tripping over a rut in the ruined ground, and yelled, If you kill me, why you'll be killing the girl as well. And the two living Vulcan and weretiger are her siblings. They'll resent for life." Kurama quickly stored the new information in his mind and responded, "Then they won't live long enough for any sort of resentment to sink in. Therefore, it was unfortunate that he had to murder them, whether it was welcome or not. The fox made every effort to avoid killing children. Furfur frantically searched the area for a way out. The possessed girl abruptly stiffened and screamed when he, or was it she, could find none. The armor that hung from her dissolved in a swath of black light, forming a tiny ball that retreated into her chest as the reptilian tail shrank back into her spine. Undoubtedly, a human girl was all that remained. Her clothes were in ruins, and her silver hair was matted with dirt. Kurama was torn between grunting in surprise at the abrupt change and sneering at the demon's cowardice. Kurama leaned forward and gave the girl a firm slap on the cheek, noting that it lolled from side to side without showing any signs of pain. Pathetic, as if hiding inside a host. A child at that. Will do you any good. He gave a disappointed grunt. How anticlimactic. I was hoping for some last-ditch effort. In order to detect any negative emotions coming from the girl that might reveal the demon's location, the fox in Shinobi furrowed his brows. Yes, it was there. Beneath the heart and the diaphragm, just below where a shinobi's chakra container would typically be, there was a tiny dark spot of such emotions that emanated fear and resentment. Kurama sighed and scratched his head. If he killed the girl, the demon would undoubtedly try to take control of him. If he felt sorry for the girl and left the host alive, he would most likely return to killing innocent people. There was nothing to do. Kurama let out another sigh and withdrew his hand, getting ready to strike when the demon tried to take control of Naruto's body. It was better to end the girl's suffering and kill Furfur in his inner world than to keep the girl as a tool forever. How unfortunate. She resembled Naruto in a perverse way, an unwilling container of a beast. He was simply amazing. He wasn't a beast. Kurama was about to give the girl a swift, painless stab wound to the heart when a well-known, incredibly tired voice spoke up, softly but just as forcefully. Stop, don't kill the girl. I've had enough bloodshed, please, Kurama. Naruto? Elethero's town, Fairy Tail's location, is about 189 miles from Magnolia Town. Sasuke ni HN, we're completely lost, aren't we? No, of course not, it's this way. Sasuke scowled at the girl beside her, who prudently continued to stare at the town's row of shops. Quietly, she said, why don't you ask the locals? I'm sure they know where it is. Sasuke gave a loud sniff and proudly raised his nose. Nonsense, I know exactly where we're going. Kagura rubbed her face. Inner world, unknown location. When Kurama opened his eyes, he saw his inner world, or, more precisely, Naruto's inner world, a familiar, musty sewer. Now that he was back in his original form, the enormous fox stretched his limbs and opened the door that separated the inner world from his room, which had once been his prison. Even though you were practically at your partner's side, it was nice to occasionally have a little privacy. However, said partner didn't look good at all. The spark that Naruto's eyes almost always had was gone, and his golden hair was matted with murk. Kurama put his head on the ground and grimaced, bringing himself level with Naruto. Naruto's gritty, even gaunt appearance wasn't a good sign at all, because one's inner world and appearance frequently reflected their mental state. Speaking of, the sewer appeared much darker and more ominous than it had recently. With a quick glance up at his partner, the boy said, Kurama. Then he gave a shaky, tentative smile. Thanks, partner. Kurama grunted, unable to properly acknowledge the thanks because he was too concerned about the boy's broken expression. You look like shit. After blinking at the direct response, Naruto grinned once more, though it was far better than the hesitant, out-of-character smile that had been on the boy's face just moments earlier. It was still not quite the beaming smile Kurama had grown to love about him. Ahahaha. Yeah, I saw the whole battle, by the way. Kurama raised an eyebrow, and Naruto remarked lightly, and good job. I guess it's better than what I expected from you, anyway. Kurama scowled at the boy's rapid acceptance of what amounted to mass murder and said, you aren't going to go on about how I killed those guerrilla villagers. Naruto sighed and his smile vanished. No, the abrupt shift in attitude was shocking. He put his hands over his face. What could I have done anyway? It reminded me a lot of the Tower of Heaven. Brat, what are you talking about? Kurama, a bloodthirsty Biju who wasn't known for being emotionally sensitive, said. The two were completely unrelated. He became less concerned and more irritated at the blonde's sudden negativity. Still covering his face with his hands, Naruto utterly disregarded him. What do I do, Kurama? His voice was muffled as he whispered, I've never let anyone down before, I've never broken my promise before. Kurama snarled and struck the blonde against a pipe that ran along the sewer wall, saying, Naruto, you need to mature. You can't stop people from dying. When Jiraiya passed away, you already experienced this. He pointed to the blonde and roared. That was different, he muttered. He chose a shinobi's death to protect Konoha. Naruto lay in a heap on the soggy floor of the sewer, not even bothering to move, not even bothering to defend. and staring through the fringe of his hair at the soft pitter-patter the water from the pipes made. This is not the same Kurama. All those people were depending on me to save them and none of them wanted to die. I disappointed them. I destroyed the lives of Urza, Simon, Miliana, and Sho, and that doesn't even account for everyone who perished in the Shinobi War as a result of me. The death of Jiraiya-sensei was unique. It's all my fault this time. He was so tired of the stupid blonde that he pinned him to the wall of his cage and put a claw under his neck while growling softly. Listen now, and listen well, Kurama said. What's different this time is that you're acting like a complete moron. Do you believe the frog freak desired to pass away? Do you believe your parents desired to pass away? I'm attached to the fool who thought he could do anything and succeeded instead of some jerk who gives up because someone died so he can live. I'm partners with the hopeful idiot who decided it would be a good idea to make friends with the Kyuubi. Naruto raised his head and gazed at the Biju, who had never displayed such emotion before, in astonishment. Kurama. Don't, Kurama, me, you shit, Kurama said, jabbing the claw further into Naruto's throat and leaving a thin line of blood behind Naruto. Your friends died for your happiness. Even the brats back at the tower don't blame you for failing to save them. You aren't the Naruto I know, so get in shape or I'll kill you myself. So what should I do? Leaning forward and ignoring the claw piercing his throat, Naruto sobbed. I can't forget them just like that. I didn't say you had to. You should live bravely because they died bravely. However, avoid buts. Consider what I said. Whelp. Kurama snarled and shook his fist uncomfortably, trying to pound his message into the blonde's thick skull. I don't expect you to heal from war and slaughter in a day, but don't get all emo on me like the Uchiha. After a lengthy silence, Naruto finally looked up at the furious fox, his eyes much clearer than before, and said, "Wanna disappoint me, Kurama?" It wasn't quite the raucous yell that had come to define Naruto as much as his whiskers, but it was a damn good beginning, he said gently. The blonde fell to the ground with a loud thump as the fox suddenly opened his hand. Do you feel better? Not specifically, but I think I can survive now, Naruto said as he stretched and winced at the many pops and cracks. You big fluffy fox, now turn over my body. Fluffy. You and I comfort you. With a clear laugh that reverberated through the dank sewer, Naruto hurried out of the inner world and avoided the fox's swipe. Being courageous? I believe I'm capable of that. The outside world. It was the biggest catfight Naruto had seen since Sakura versus Ino when he opened his eyes. You're a bitch. Get me untied. You have no right to treat me like this. Kurama had apparently woken up the white-haired girl he had previously curb-stomped. Bitch? I'm not going to let you go unless it's to give you the beating you deserve, you flat-chested fool. According to the circumstances, Urza had also done so, and it appeared that the two were completely at odds. Flat-chested? Why should I, you piece of shit? You're the one who's tied up here, you skank with the skimpy outfit. With hesitation, the younger sister, the other white-haired girl who had been taken over by one of the beasts, said, Anyo, I believe you ought to pay attention to the red-haired Ne-san. Mira Ne-chan, we are the ones who are tethered, after all. Yes, sis, you might want to hear what the girl has to say. It might expedite things a little, the boy with the white hair said uneasily. What? Exclaimed the named Mira, pinning the two with a glare as she flailed in fury. Don't argue with your sister, Lysana. Elfman. In any case, what happened and why are we tied up? The chance to continue verbally attacking each other was seized by Urza, who said, yeah, listen to your siblings, they're definitely smarter than you. Naruto decided that now might be a good time to intervene. Geez Urza, you sure know how to kick up a ruckus, Naruto said as he stepped forward and severely chopped Urza's head with the side of his hand. Is it impossible for a man to sleep? He asked quietly, noticing that Mira, who had white hair, was staring at him in disbelief at his abrupt appearance. He waved to her, and she immediately rearranged her face into a rather menacing frown. Urza, on the other hand, became quiet and leapt away from the blonde while giving him a suspicious look. Are you Naruto or the weirdo? Stranger? Naruto gave him a vulpine expression, scratched his head, and closed his eyes in bewilderment. Naruto. Who else would I be? Oof. Naruto fell to the ground harshly, trapped in a glomping hug courtesy of Urza. God. I was so worried, she sobbed. I thought you were dead. The blonde awkwardly patted the girl on the back. It was unlike her to break down so easily, but seeing such a tragedy as the tower would do that to someone? Geez. It's alright Urza. I'm alright. After all, looking after you is essentially my job now, so I'm not leaving anytime soon. Urza simply nodded, holding on to Naruto even more tightly by this time, though, the embrace was turning into a chokehold as Urza regained consciousness. Stupid Naruto. Will you let me rot with the lookalike? Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, a certain Mirajane cut the moment short. Stop talking and untie me already, please. All three siblings shifted around in their bounds, uneasy at the awkward silence, and she flinched as Naruto looked up at her, staring directly into her sapphire eyes. Recalling some of the more painful injuries Kurama must have inflicted on her, she bit her lip and looked away, abruptly keeping quiet. He was feeling better, but not quite at his best, so Naruto sighed and got ready to put on his mask. He then smiled broadly to reassure them that he didn't mean any harm, hoping the smile didn't seem too forced. "Are you okay?" With warmth, he said. After giving it some thought, he probably ought to have been a little more firm because the Mira girl took his cordial tone for granted too soon. "Do I appear okay?" The siblings of the noisy one were all right, and Naruto sighed once more, opening his senses for nature chakra deep within their chakra reserves. He sensed the power of the beasts that had possessed them, but it was so diluted that it made no difference. Was this another kind of magic that Rob had mentioned to him? However, the noisy, annoying girl, Naruto, that's like calling the kettle black. The demon's energy was still strong beneath her skin and could take control at any moment, but it was interesting to note that the girl's own energy was fighting down the demons, as if the possession had jolted her reserves. "You were worse." Rather guiltily, Naruto ignored the older girl's cries and curses, deciding that it was better to be safe than sorry and that it wouldn't be good for her to go on a rampage again. Naruto then went over and began untying the two younger siblings. "Sorry about this," he grumbled. "I can't be sure that the demon that possessed you isn't going to do so again, so I'll have to leave you like this." The girl was louder than Sakura, which was saying something, and at least she was cuter. Naruto winced as the Mira girl's shrieks increased by 10 more decibels. Eleuthero's village, where Fairy Tail is located, is about 189 miles from Magnolia Town. That idiot of a Nii-san had finally swallowed his pride and decided to ask around for the location of Fairy Tail. Yes, it had taken more than 3 hours for him to finally give in to her demands, but the important thing was that she had finally won an argument, and Kagura grinned happily as she hummed to herself. It might have been a bad idea to bring up Fairy Tail in front of the villagers, but they meant him no real harm. The village was so peaceful that they couldn't even handle a small Hadra's stampede. It seemed that a guild member had come here on a mission and ended up destroying the entire village. And what was even more infuriating was that it was an accident. The villagers had finally managed to rebuild the town from the ground up, so the incident was still fresh in their minds. If she ever wore a dress, Sasuke Nii would rant for at least half an hour about how a dress wasn't appropriate battlewear. Kagura was definitely thankful to the mysterious boy. But he was such a man. Kagura smiled as she saw the girl, who was a few years older than her, running toward her. She was wearing an orange one-piece dress and had her hair up in a single ponytail. "Hello, Kana-chan." He didn't seem to care, but then again, he didn't seem to care about anything, she said brightly, sneakily glancing forward at Sasuke's walking form to see if he did. "Kagura-chan, are you really going to leave? In this town full of geezers, you're pretty much my only friend," Kana sobbed. They both giggled softly. It's interesting to note that the villagers treated Kana like a princess despite the fact that she was the child of that Fairy Tail member. It appeared that they were more upset about the member's desertion of his family than the village's devastation, as well as the fact that he had depleted the village's alcohol supply, which was an accomplishment in and of itself. Sasuke, who had returned to using his sword as a walking stick, said curtly, "Kagura, hurry up, we're a long way from Magnolia." Fortunately for him, Kana's mother still remembered the location of her lover's headquarters and had provided him with directions. Kana leaned forward and whispered in Kagura's ear as she stuck her tongue out at him, and the two girls laughed quietly again. "Even though he's such an ass, you should really thank him." Sasuke Nii, being thanked? Agad. What for? Kagura wondered, raising an eyebrow. With disbelief, she asked. "No idea, but Ka-san says to pass the message." Kana shrugged, appearing just as perplexed as Kagura. It seems that he taught her something useful during their conversation. Was this the same emotionless boy they were talking about? Kagura's eyebrows were raised so high they were almost invisible. "Really?" she muttered. "No way, he always has such a stick up his ass?" Kagura was so taken aback by Kana's revelations that she was unaware of Sasuke's hand twitching in frustration and starting to draw his sword before he sighed and sheathed it. "Really, yes. I don't know what your friend is like exactly, but if he made mom happy, that's good in my book," Kana whispered back, maintaining the same loud volume. "Whoa, perhaps he isn't really that cruel after all." Sasuke finally gritted his teeth and said, "Would you please hurry up, Kagura?" The Uchiha's expression was still stoic, but his white knuckles showed how irritated he was. "Kana needs to go back to her mother, and you need to learn how to use your magic, before you blow something up." "I'm not going to blow anything up. How could you? If it happened with a fully legal mage like the one from Fairy Tail, it can happen to you, Sasuke said. Letting the angry little girl catch up to him with a sigh and a gentle shove, he grinned in spite of himself as she stumbled and ran forward to try to regain her balance. Instead of responding to that, Kagura craned her head back and waved to Kana, saying, "Bye Kana. I'll pay you a visit someday." "I'll be here waiting," Sasuke moaned. Girls. Unidentified location. Furfur has vanished, taken in by a child. BWA. That fool. He deserves that for abandoning us. He is regarded as the weakest for a reason. You twit. Don't laugh, you might have experienced it as well. His possession of a girl who was prone to Satan's soul takeover was merely unfortunate rather than consuming her eternal reserves. His possession accelerated them. Haha. It doesn't matter, he allowed a child to beat him. In any case, there is no longer a way to get inside Mavis's heart. Lord Zeref will be extremely unhappy. Speak. Lord Zeref warned against approaching her, didn't he? On the verge of death, that is. Silver, shut up, I'm doing this for the Lord. Ever since the Dragon Wars, he has not been himself. He even made the decision to lock us all up. You guys really did begin destroying innocent people. What about our other connection, anyway? Sayla, Tempesta. Don't worry, Ufufu Kyoka-sama, Jelal is still securely in my hand. I haven't found any of the other books yet. Nonetheless, we have managed to apprehend an additional 30 souls in a few years. We ought to have enough to bring Keith and Easel back to life. Excellent, excellent, if only END would wake up now. Fairy Tail Guild, Magnolia Town, a few weeks later. Bawahahaha. You, remaining loyal. When poor Lyuzuka allows me to go on a date with her, I'll believe that. Gasping for air, Makarov rolled on the ground, choked out a few more guffaws, took a big gulp of ale, and immediately spat it in Gildart's face instead of continuing to laugh. After waiting patiently for Makarov to recover from his spasms, the normally equally boisterous Ace of Fairy Tail threw the old man against the wall when he realized that Makarov had no immediate plans to end. Dude, I'm serious. Cornelia is her name, Gildarts exclaimed angrily. Makarov simply kept catching his breath. Speaking of which, Ace took a deep breath and let it out, bracing himself for the true reason he had confronted the guild master. Half of the guild sent him an apologetic look for their master's actions, while the other half had chosen to join in, more as a pretext to filch a drink from the bar than to actually make fun of Gildarts. I'm leaving the guild. That quickly caught everyone's attention. Fortunately, Makarov's snickers stopped abruptly, and Gildarts looked around nervously at the guild, who were all staring at him in surprise. Why? Was the obvious query. Gildarts held up his hands defensively and said, "Don't worry, it's not permanent. Cornelia, the girl I mentioned earlier. No, we had a daughter named Kana, not hers. The girl is approximately 9 years old." So why leave now? Makarov asked, raising an eyebrow. I would have advised you to leave 9 years ago and raise her properly in order to bring her here. If anything, you awful father, why the delay? Gildarts flinched, even though the slight about his parenting abilities was intended to be humorous. I had no idea, he said. Cornelia just got in touch with me. Why are you leaving, then? The red-haired Ace meant well, but sometimes he spoke too much to make his point clearly. Makarov asked directly. The old man wasn't against Gildarts taking a break from the guild, but he couldn't excuse the man without a good reason. Gildarts swallowed again, recalling how he had nearly destroyed the village when he read the letter. See, Cornelia's dying. He said thickly, she wants me to come back so the three of us can be a family for the short time she can be together with me. Makarov blushed and rushed to give the trembling man a tight hug, saying, "Oh no, I'm so sorry, Gildarts." Holding on to his surrogate father as if he were his lifeline, Gildarts shook his head and said plainly, "You couldn't have known." The other members of the guild exchanged a warm glance with the master and Ace of Fairy Tail, but the affectionate moment was cut short when the guild door flew off its hinges with a loud clatter, smashed into the bar, breaking the alcohol of the guild, and a huge human-shaped projectile entered. Yee! With a loud shriek, Kagura flew through the air and struck Gildarts and Makarov with remarkable accuracy, sending the three of them tumbling head over heels across the guild floor with a loud crash. The guild members who were watching looked at each other and laughed at how quickly Gildarts' emotional moment was destroyed. A shadowed figure was seen outside the doorway of the guild, agitated and irritated. I've finally located it. That nasty old Mana, where is he? The figure snarled loudly, he owes me some tomatoes.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.